Members, at the break, we were debating the nurses and midwives bill. I presume that we are now ready. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is once again a privilege, and we dare not take it for granted. But once again, it is a privilege to speak in this honorable place and to make my contribution to the nurses and midwifery bill on behalf of the exceptional people of East Grand Bahama, who I will be eternally grateful to. First, Madam Speaker, I've had the good pleasure of living with a registered nurse for the past 23 years. The good pleasure. I have a particular interest in the nursing profession. I'm not gonna let them take me down that road. I'm gonna stay focused.
Stay in the spirit.
I gonna stay in the spirit. I am proud to say that my wife Tammy has been a registered nurse for the past 23 years. I will say, like Winston Churchill said, that my most brilliant achievement was to persuade my wife to marry me. Madam Speaker, nurses have had a profound ability to positively affect the lives of people when they are at their most vulnerable. Even to this day, I can recall being in the hospital at the age of 4 years old. I'd gotten severe burns all along the left side of my body. Still have the scars today. And I was treated by Nurse Patricia Edgecombe. I still remember her name. I don't know exactly what she did, but I know she made me feel better. She retired last year, and every time I would see her, I would say, there goes my nurse in Grand Bahama. So I am sure nurses all around the country have left similar impressions on people. Yeah. During COVID, there was a tremendous amount of stress and pressure that was put on our nurses, who went above and beyond the call of duty. The nurses in Grand Bahama, who went through Hurricane Dorian. Many lost their homes. Some even lost loved ones and had to treat patients in tents for a very, very long time. So, Madam Speaker, we all owe a debt of gratitude to every nurse and every healthcare professional who serves in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, it is because we owe so much to this profession that we must not fail them. Eyewitness News on the 21st of September, 2021, had a headline, and their headline was, "This is not acceptable. PM Davis tours PMH, sets healthcare as #1 priority for the first 100 days. The Prime Minister, as he should have, days after the election, toured PMH and said that this was an unacceptable situation. The Prime Minister made promises to nurses and the doctors and the entire staff. Fast forward 16 months later. What does the Prime Minister do? Tours the hospital and declares 16 months later the hospital is in crisis. Madam Speaker, it begs the question, why has the government not made progress in 16 months? Madam Speaker, I wish to remind the public that the FNM, having to deal with COVID, also negotiated and secured funding in July of 2021 for upgrades to PMH and also to construct a 5-story tower with major improvements. In 2021, the FNM authorized PMH to access a loan funding of $89 million from the World Bank to fund capital projects. The then Minister of Health, Renwood Wells, said these funds would be used to renovate the eye ward, the female medical ward 2, the former physiotherapy unit, the former female surgical, the children's ward, the male medical, and the decommissioned ICU, along with the emergency department. A new infectious disease ward would have been constructed. He said, and I quote in the budget speech, "I am pleased to present to you that during this budget period, we will undertake the construction of a new 6-story tower at the Princess Margaret Hospital." Madam Speaker, the land was secured. The money was already secured. The tower will also provide easy access. This is what the minister said. The tower will provide easy access and flow to patients on the inpatient ward that will accommodate the primary users of the ICU, neonatal intensive care units, and the operating theater. A new tower was expected to house a new obstetrics, gynecology ward, children's ward, surgical ward, medical ward, private hospital boarding rooms, and ancillary services. The designs and the drawings were underway. A contract had already been signed by the Beck Group for the design of the 5-story or the 6-story tower. Preliminary designs were already in place. And as we said, Madam Speaker, funds were already in the bank. Madam Speaker, the PLP government not only canceled the plans for the 5-story tower, but they also canceled the funding for the 5-story tower. Not only did they cancel the loan, but they returned the money. Madam Speaker, could you imagine, given the challenges that we are facing in healthcare, the admitted crisis that we are facing at PMH, faced with millions of dollars that we're paying out to Doctors Hospital for the assistance, and the government gives the money back. It is curious, though, Madam Speaker, that the government would give these funds back, which were at the time being held in the central bank for the hospital, but would break the law in the Central Bank Act to borrow money from the central bank. Why would you give these funds back but break the law to borrow the money from the central bank? Something that they have yet to correct. In my view, this was a critical mistake made by this government. Had they continued with the plans of the FNM construction would have been well on its way. They were planned for a groundbreaking ceremony in May of 2022. So construction would have been well on its way. Renovations would have been well on their way. The morale of nurses and doctors would have been higher as they would have already begun to see their new and improved future. Madam Speaker, the Nurses Union president said, we can no longer do business in a facility like this. She said, in order for our patients to receive a standard of high level of care until death or until delivery of birth, we have to put our people in a better place. Madam Speaker, a huge challenge for nurses and all our healthcare professions is the overcrowding at PMH. There are simply too many people attempting to access the healthcare system. Unfortunately, nurses, due to the action of this government, this problem will become even worse because of the anticipated increase in cost in private healthcare. Nurses already have it or already in a difficult circumstance because of the overcrowding. And unfortunately, if the price of private healthcare goes up, more persons will be added to the public healthcare system, which will only make matters worse. Madam Speaker, the government's actions are destroying the middle class. Really? The Ministry of Finance has determined that insurance companies may no longer deduct VAT paid out as an input VAT claim. Whatever the circumstance that led to this position, this will have the effect of increasing the cost of healthcare premiums and healthcare costs for tens of thousands of Bahamian families. Madam Speaker, we just saw today's business headline. One just has to look at the business headline which says, patients are warned, brace for VAT shock. Ensure significant cost rise even at the smallest level. Clearly, their decision to add a new, absolutely, absolutely. Clearly, their decision to add a new tax on insurance companies will increase insurance premiums for all of us. They have been told this by the industry. Second, their decision to add VAT on insurance claims will also increase the cost of healthcare. Imagine, Madam Speaker, anyone, and this affects all of us because every one of us in here and all of the public servants who have health insurance, all of the companies that have health insurance for their persons, all the individual Bahamians that have health insurance. Listen up. Imagine anyone going for a procedure. Let's say if the procedure is $50,000. Now, normally, you would put in your claim to the insurance company. The insurance company would say, okay, you pay your deductible, and once you pay your deductible, we will approve that expense. Normally, all you would pay would be the deductible. But now, in addition to the deductible, you will have to pay upfront VAT on the procedure, which if the procedure is $50,000, you will now have to pay your deductible and upfront $5,000 VAT to cover that VAT expense that the insurance company now will have to pay the government. This could mean life and death for someone. And this is not just something that I'm saying. This is what the insurance company are telling you up front. They are saying, come April, when you intend to implement this, this is what is going to happen. Before we approve anything, the customer, the client, which is us, the ordinary Bahamian, will now have to pay VAT on what that total bill is. When confronted with this, when confronted with not consulting the public, because we only heard about this because the insurance companies now are saying this is what is going to happen. When confronted with not consulting the public on this, here's what the financial secretary is quoted as saying. Mr. Wilson in response said, the issue did not rise to the level of a policy change or alteration of the VAT Act itself. Events that would require advance consultation. We don't need to talk to the people. The law is the law. We don't need to talk to the people. Yeah, we don't need to talk to the people. He presented it as a technical matter in terms of interpretation of the law, confined to one group of VAT taxpayers. And in his words, that doesn't require all the fanfare. But Madam Speaker, it was a change. It was a change in the government's interpretation of the law. This does rise to the level of a policy change. Yes. And anything that has, forget whether it is already in the law, it is a change in which the government is treating insurance companies. And it is a change in which it will affect Bahamians. So it does rise to the level of policymakers. Anything that has the potential to increase healthcare costs for hundreds of thousands of Bahamians is a policy matter.
It's hundreds of millions of dollars.
So I asked, Madam Speaker, did the cabinet even decide on this matter?
We all aware.
And why have we not heard from a policy maker on this decision? Something that would have an effect on thousands of Bahamians. And we have yet to hear from a policy maker as to what the position of the policy makers are with respect to this decision. This government just doesn't seem to get it. Your actions continue to increase the burdens on the backs of Bahamians. And again, I say it is destroying the middle class. Madam Speaker, electricity costs are increased because of a bad decision. Bread basket items cost has increased because of a bad decision. Medication costs have increased because of a bad decision. We already warned about the additional amount customs brokers would have to pay importing goods, and importing goods as a result of the additional amount that they would have to pay would increase. Again, the cost of importing goods increased because of a bad decision. And now you want premiums and private health care to increase again because of another bad decision. How much more can Bahamians take?
Enough is enough. Let it go.
Madam Speaker, I didn't come to talk long, so this is in conclusion. I end with this.
Talk all day, sir. Talk all day.
Nurses will tell you that non-communicable diseases are a true health crisis.
Yes, yes.
I I don't claim it, but they tell me that I have high blood pressure. But I reviewed that. But I still taking the pills. It again threatens to make things even worse for nurses and health professionals. It is most certainly a fight that we all must fight. However, we heard about the announced sugar tax, sugar and salt tax that is being proposed. And Madam Speaker, we reject any discussion on any additional measure being proposed to introduce a tax on sugar and salt, as was announced by the Minister for Health. First, who are we to believe? Because on the one hand, the Minister for Health says a sugar tax is coming or a salt tax is coming. And on the other hand, the Prime Minister says no new taxes. So who are we to?
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
The member for East Grand Bahamas. I talk about minister of the gospel. I'm taking minister of the gospel. Yeah. Minister of the gospel. I know what church he goes to. Anyhow, the member for East Grand Bahama indicated that me as minister, I did foreshadow the possibility of the implementation of a sugar and salt tax, as well as reduction or elimination of trans fats, which is something that's been around for many ministers. It's an issue that is in place by the Pan American Organization. You know that the former Minister of Health talked about it. He talked about the tax on sugary drinks. He spoke about the banning of all of these things. And you were sitting in the cabinet at that time, and you didn't really voice your opinion at that particular point either.
Thank you, honorable member.
I didn't know, Madam Speaker, I didn't know that the Minister of Health was in the cabinet at the same time. He was in the cabinet for him to say what I said and what I didn't say. But that's okay. Madam Speaker, my position again is this. My position again is this. The Minister for Health has spoken about a proposed tax on sugar. He said it is in the legislation is in the Attorney General's office. The Prime Minister. So I asked the question: who are we to believe?
Disconnect, man.
Because the Prime Minister says no new taxes.
Disconnect.
So if we proposing a tax, but the Prime Minister says no new taxes, that is why I asked the question.
That's his correct.
Who are we to believe?
No new tax.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
As the Minister of Health, who sit in conferences around the world with the Pan American Health Organization, with CARFA and all of our countries, as a CARICOM region, it is our responsibility to speak about the devastating effects of certain types of foods. My job is basically, as the Minister of Health, to bring forth possible legislation that can change behavioral patterns and get people on the right track with the proper nutrition. This is a cabinet conclusion. No. I am just telling you that I am preparing the necessary legislation to present to my colleagues. I do not make the decision independently, but as a Minister of Health and Wellness, it is my responsibility to alert my colleagues and the Bahamian population of where we're going to go. And so this is an age-old discussion. It was in your cabinet, it's now in our cabinet. And at the end of the day, a decision has to be made, and it will be made from the cabinet and led by the Prime Minister.
Thank you, honorable member.
So, Madam Speaker, again, There's a disconnect. And so, Madam Speaker, it is inconceivable that this government is even talking about new taxes and has, well, I can't say they have failed because they did it this morning. But they were extremely late in presenting the legally mandated fiscal strategy report, which was due back in November. And now they presented it this morning. Well, I now ask, and now I do ask, when are we going to have the debate on the fiscal strategy report? The FNM deeply believes in, and to the member for Tall Pines' point, the FNM deeply believes in improving and has worked tirelessly to address the crisis of non-communicable diseases in the Bahamas. Studies show, and I'm sure that the minister has seen these studies, but studies show that while the increase in cost of unhealthy food does decrease its consumption, price decreases have a larger effect on diet. So in other words, while if we put the price of sugar higher, yes, that has an effect on causing people to decrease the use of sugar. But if we decrease the amount or the price of healthy foods, it has a larger effect on your diet. Yes. So I asked the question, if we are talking about a sugar tax, or I would suggest, before we talk about a sugar tax, where are the government's plans to decrease the cost of healthy foods and to provide help to those less fortunate to obtain healthy foods? The FNM calls on the government to first implement subsidies for healthy foods, such as fruits and vegetables, before it increases the tax burden on working Bahamians. So, Madam Speaker, as I conclude, I ask the government to put down their arrogant ways, listen to the people, also, Madam Speaker, before, and I sincerely ask them to do this, because it affects all of us, and it also affects thousands of Bahamians out there. Please consider removing VAT off of medication.
Yes.
Rethink their interpretation on VAT when it comes to medical claims, because the insurance companies have already told you that the cost is going to go up for medical claims. Rethink your interpretation on the business licenses for insurance companies, because again, the insurance companies have already said to you, this is an added expense for them. They will not eat up that added expense. It will then mean they will increase premiums for everyone.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
And Bahama, I don't know if you had the opportunity to see the release from the Ministry of Finance to the Bahamas Insurance Association on VAT treatment for health insurance claims. In that release, and I'll lay it for you so you can read it. In that release, they made it very clear that these particular claims were collected by the insurance company, and they went into the insurance company as input and was not given to the government. This is not a new thing that we're putting in place. This is simply the government trying to collect its revenue. So for you to say or create the impression that we're implementing a new VAT It's completely, it's incorrect. The insurance company was collecting this revenue, and instead of turning it on, no, you talking about VAT on insurance. You said insurance. No, let's talk about insurance first, because you're dodging, East Grand Bahama. Let's deal with the facts.
But you did raise it.
You raised it.
Let me be clear on what I'm speaking about.
It's an
Because
impact on the consumer.
there are two issues that were raised by the insurance companies. And Madam Speaker, this isn't something that just came into my head. This is what the insurance companies have said. There are two. I'm on my feet. There are two issues the insurance companies have raised. The first is the added business license cost to the insurance companies. That's the first issue. The second issue that they are raising is VAT on insurance claims. Now, they have said two things. If you add a business license on us, we call that a new tax. That's what the insurance companies have said. It is a new tax on them because it is something new that they have not paid before.
No.
I've said that before. If you need to go back in the tapes, you can go back in the tapes. But because you are, please, I'm not yielding. I'm not yielding.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
How is that?
You're changing the goalposts.
He didn't say that.
That is a point of order.
Let him explain.
You changed the goalposts,
Members,
and
members,
you're not.
members.
No, you
No,
were
members.
speaking. You were speaking about VAT on insurance claims. Well, I am correcting you on VAT on insurance claims because it's not a new VAT. It's not new.
You know you went wrong on that.
It is not
on,
new.
man.
With all due respect, my colleague. No, I'm not lost my
you
point.
lost it. No,
Sit
sir.
down and let me explain the point.
Honorable members, I've identified, I've acknowledged Tall Pines.
Thank you so much. Madam Speaker, East Grand Bahama, I don't know if it's intentionally, but he was communicating two things in one sentence.
No.
He spoke about VAT on business license. I didn't hear that, but I accept it because he's an honorable
Only
person.
just now. Only just
No,
now.
as an honorable person, I accept that. But you were speaking. No, I'm wide awake. I'm wide awake, sir. Wide awake. Listen to me. No, let me finish. Madam Speaker,
I wrote
protect
down
me.
what he said, you know.
Yes, we looking at what the member
You
said.
said,
I wasn't in here.
That's what you said. No. I
No.
don't know what you said today.
You
said
spoke.
today.
You spoke as it relates to VAT on insurance claims.
Correct.
I'm speaking about VAT on insurance claims because in your presentation, you created the impression that the government is putting on a new VAT.
That's right.
That is not so.
Yes, he did.
That is not so. Allow me to finish,
He
please.
said effective April, there'll be a new tax.
Listen to me very carefully. I referred you.
Members, allow
I
the member to make a
referred
point.
the member to the press release from the Ministry of Finance, and I would lay it. I lay in what the Ministry of Finance. Let me finish. No, this was released on the 29th of January in the year of our Lord 2023 in response to the BIA. And clearly in the response from the Ministry of Finance, it said that insurance companies, as they found in an audit, one insurance company was collecting VAT and using it as an input. And it was not handed over to the government, and that was not their revenue. Let me finish, please. You'll have an opportunity. What it was the Ministry of Finance then went on to have meetings. And I think some of the statements that is outlined in the news report here on Tuesday, January the 31st, is a bit misleading because it creates the impression that the government is implementing a new VAT. This VAT has already been collected, and it was a discussion to turn it over to the government and not use as an input.
Was that cost ever absorbed by the consumer?
consumer. That's the issue.
Yes.
What you mean?
Always
It's always was.
Always was.
Always was.
Madam Speaker, please. Madam Speaker, the
Thank
minister,
you, Honorable Member.
the minister can speak. The minister can speak to this. Minister, the minister can speak to this in his wrap up. But I have been clear. There are two issues that the insurance company has raised. The insurance company has said that you are now requiring them to pay business license. They call that a new tax. And they say, which again, the minister completely dodged the question and completely dodges the issue. The issue is, the insurance company have confirmed that this will be a cost that the consumer will have to bear, which means that premiums will be increased. And it also means that that's the first one. The second one, when it comes to claims, also means that when I claim for my medical insurance, I will have to pay VAT on that in advance. This is what the insurance companies have said. They've warned the government that if you continue down this road, the cost will be significant for every Bahamian that deals with private health care. And so we are saying it's not we're not advocating for insurance companies. We are advocating for the people that have to pay the VAT. We are advocating for those people who, Bahamians, once I have to pay, because again, before you had to pay only the deductible. Now the insurance companies are saying you will have to pay the deductible and you will have to pay VAT upfront. That is something that was different. That is a new cost. It is a new cost. That's the point. It's something that we never had to pay.
Taking on the claim.
It is some.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rum, Kingston, Salvador.
All right. First of all, right, I think you have to appreciate that VAT is a service tax, if you want to call it. Right. So if you provide a service, right, the service attracts VAT. Right. So what has been happening is that the insurance company, they should tell you, right, we're not paying tax on a service that they were paying for. That service is if you go to a doctor for a care, you pay VAT for that care, on that care, don't you? Yes. Now, no. So, no. Let me finish that. Then you ask the question. Let me tell you what. So, it was discovered, right, that the insurers who have group insurance, insurers were not paying when doctors provide service to patients. They were not paying VAT for that service. Now, the way the law is constructed, it attracts VAT, and they were not paying it. They would tell you that they have accepted that VAT should have been paid, and they know not paying it. Right? The government decided, well, look, we'll forego it, and let's visit and see how it could be implemented. And they've agreed, and they said, look, and what they're saying is, they didn't want it to come on right away. So they asked us in writing, right, to not put it on. We were suggesting, I think in September sometime, they asked us to put it off till the end of the year, which is passed, and they also asked us to put it further to April. That has been done. In the meantime, they are suggesting, right, that VAT is paid on premiums, but it's not. What happened is there's a fee on premium. I think it's 3% on premiums that's been paid. But we're not paying. That is not being that's not vatable. Right? That is exempted from VAT services. Right? But the question is, right, should the insurers pay for the medical service that they're paying for? The access it does. So right now, they're running afoul of the act. And so we are implementing it. And yes, they see it as an additional cost for them. And yes, we are taking into account the complaint about the additional costs. But the law is the law. And so so the conversation is continuing. And it's unfortunate that they want to become a public, they want to debate it in the public, but it is what it is.
Can I first thank you for your intervention? It's helpful. The question that I am concerned about would be this. And it is not something that, and the point that I was trying to make is not something that we are guessing or something that just came into our heads, but it's something that came from the insurance companies. Their scenario, which they put in the form of a letter, was that if you have a procedure and that procedure costs X amount of dollars, you would only pay the deductible, or you would only pay VAT on the deductible. This is what they're saying. The insurance companies. Let me go back again. They're saying that if you have a procedure and that procedure or medical service provided, and that, let's say for example, that costs $50,000, you would only pay the deductible, or you would only pay the deductible and VAT on the deductible. The consumer, the person, the insured person. What they are saying is now, because of this change, you will also pay in advance VAT on that entire service. So if that service is $50,000, you will pay the deductible, and the insured person would also have to pay the 10% of the entire procedure, which would be, if it's $50,000, it would be $5,000. That is what is concerning, because that is a expense that the consumer did not have before. And that's the point that we are raising, that it is an expense that the consumer did not have before.
I start from the premise. First of all, the insured person is paying a premium to cover a risk. They're paying a premium to cover a risk. Right? The insurance company ought to take into account, right, in determining what that premium should be, what the risk factors are. And so part of the cost associated with paying for medical service, the VAT Act says you have to pay VAT. So one would have thought, and that's what is probably believed, that would have been factored into the premium. So it ought not to have been an additional cost to the consumer. Now, we hear the argument, right, because they're now saying that risk factor was not factored into the premium. Right? Well, all costs in business are passed on to consumers. We appreciate that. So that is being taken into consideration in our discussion with insurance companies. Right? And there's a difference as well. See, there's also is where the person is insured as an individual. So I go to an insurance company, I take out medical insurance. Or if there's a group insurance, those are factors that you have to take into account. So it's not, we would do anything to avoid causing further costs to the consumer. In fact, we met with the insurers and we met them. We responded to their complaints because we, in effect, had moved the 3% on premiums and converted into the issue of into the VAT services as well. They came and they pointed out why, and guess what? When they came back to us, they said, "Well, don't do this, but increase." They want us to increase to 3%. I wondered why they want us to increase to 3% on the premium. All that is in writing. No. Yeah. I'm just saying to you that it was curious that they would have come to us, right? Because we're also considering the business license fees for them, right? So we are concerned about that. Now, the insurance company has not been complying with the Act and the VAT Act because of their own interpretation of it. So we're taking the yes. What I'm saying is that so we're taking the path of least resistance, and we're accepting that misinterpretation and leaving that alone. And so we're moving forward and trying to find a happy medium where we are not going to cost the patients and or the consumers further costs.
I just want to, and I thank you again, Prime Minister, for your intervention. Just to be clear, are you saying that the business license requests for insurance companies, that you are not proceeding with that if that has an added cost on?
But he's asking that directly.
I said all of that is still in the mix.
Okay.
We are still, our minds are still open. We're still discussing it because it is only the business license fees. The insurers don't pay it. Right? And they are.
I will
so
take my seat.
if we exclude what I call the core business, there are other incomes that insurance companies make.
Yeah.
That they should be paying business license fees on, but we're not.
I will take my seat, and the only thing I will conclude by saying is, we raise these issues because of what the insurance companies have said, and we raise them on behalf of the consumer and on behalf of the insured, on behalf of the working Bahamian. That's why we raise them. And
I'm not taking umbrage to your raising it, because what I'm saying to you is that those factors that you raise that is concerning to the consumer are the factors that we're taking into account in attempting to arrive at an amicable solution between ourselves and the insurance industry.
and no decision has been made as yet.
Members?
Well, we have put a position to them, and they've come back to us, and we'll be looking at what they said about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, I rise again in this honorable House at the grace of the good people of Freetown, and I'm grateful for them for the support that they give me and the confidence that they repose in me. Madam Speaker, as it is the first time in my recollection I'm addressing in this new year, I wish them all a happy new year. It was my pleasure this morning to attend at the Uriah McPhee School, where we have a breakfast program 3 days a week, providing hot breakfast to the students the faculty and parents at the request of Kirstner Michelle, the head boy, and their nominee for Student of the Year. He was putting on a healthy eating option to the breakfast where he provided fresh fruit for his colleagues to go along with the hot breakfast that was provided. I congratulate him and I wish him luck in the Student of the Year competition. And I particularly congratulate his mother, Lucy. In this time where we see a lot of young men going astray, it is good to note that good things do come from our young men and that we must continue to encourage them. Madam Speaker, I stand to make a contribution on the Nurses and Midwives Bill 2022 and to declare an interest, Madam Speaker. I was delivered in the settlement of Duncantown, Ragged Island, by a midwife. The history of my mother's delivery goes thus, Madam Speaker. The first child delivered on the island died. And so my eldest living brother was delivered in New Providence, where there were doctors. My two sisters who followed were delivered in Ragged Island by midwives. I followed, delivered by a midwife, and my brothers who were twins, because they were twins, were again delivered in New Providence, where there were doctors. Listening to the Minister for Health and Wellness contribution, that is an indication of how nurses and midwives have plied their trade in this country and how we have had use of them. Unfortunately, for a number of years now, there is neither, as far as I'm aware, a midwife or a nurse in Duncantown, Ragged Island.
Madam Speaker, protect the member from freedom.
From what? I'm not troubled by it, Sinans. You just concentrate. Be focused and you'll get past it. So, Madam Speaker, Sinans, the young people have a saying, they say, don't watch nothing.
Watch these shoes.
Sedans, don't watch nothing. Madam Speaker, it is very unfortunate that following the passage of a hurricane, Ragged Island has been without a clinic and without a nurse for some time. I've had discussions with the Minister of Health and Wellness because at all time at HMBS gunpoint, there is a Royal Bahamas Defense Force medic who we shall have to have discussions about qualification under Nurses and Midwives Act to be, so that again, the brave men and women of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force can multitask and provide us services. Madam Speaker, I am constantly amazed when I come to this place of what falls from the other side. In the law, we have a saying that you are not permitted to approbate and reprobate. We call it blowing hot and cold. So if you have a proposition that this side should not be beating on its chest, claiming that we created sliced bread, and that the other side are menaces to society, then you really shouldn't do it yourself when you take to your feet. Because I have sat here and I've heard a number of things that, in my judgment, in my opinion, amounts to that. We're debating an act that everyone agrees advances this practice and is very necessary in this country. And then we are told that the Honorable Prime Minister toured the Princess Margaret Hospital at the beginning of the term and toured again 16 months later, and nothing had happened, when the side opposite knows that that is actually not accurate. On the second tour, to suggest that nothing had happened, which was what was said, is completely inaccurate. The tour was to actually view the work that was being done. And, Madam Speaker, what is even worse about it
Members,
You know, Madam Speaker,
members,
I like to listen to the other side because Proverbs says, as a man thinks in his heart, so therefore is he. I hear a lot of talk about campaigning from the other side, and I understand plenty of that going on the other side. But none of it going on this side. But, Madam Speaker, what makes it even worse is what always falls from the other side is we're the government, we need to fix it. And then when we go about fixing it, we hear a lot of talk. So the Minister of Health and Wellness, and sometimes I'll speak out of school because people say sometimes, well, I'm not a deep freeze, Madam Speaker. I'm not even an icebox. So don't tell me nothing you don't want to hear again. But the Minister of Health and Wellness, we often accuse him of talking too much. He tell us about how he go to this clinic and it mash up. He go to the next clinic and it mash up. He go on these wards and they're mashed up. And he traveled through the entire Commonwealth of the Bahamas to assess the condition of the plant. And then he comes to get money to remedy it. And yes, there is a deal with Doctors Hospital to entertain patients from Princess Margaret while the wards are renovated. But it behooves the other side, who did not renovate for 4.5 years. 4.5 years. When their Prime Minister was a doctor for 4.5 years. Did not renovate for 4.5 years, to be coming in here waxing lyrical about a 16-month interval when the persons at the hospital say not only is the work underway, but it is on schedule. So no, we don't think that you all hate Bahamians. So don't you try and say that we do. At the end of the day, Madam Speaker, if one says, and one has to be careful how one says it, because no doubt there will be speaking to how you draw down money, put it in an account while it's earning interest, doing nothing with it, no plans approved, no nothing. And any mother could tell you, you don't put money in an account that you're not using and start accruing interest on it for nothing. But that's wise planning to the other side. And they cry shame on us for thinking that that's a silly thing to do. But that's exactly what they did. And they say, it's all well done. So at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, we have to, I can take my time, Kalani. You should have waited to come. You should have waited another 20 minutes and you could have done. You could have just talked and leave, but you come 20 minutes too early, sir. So that we say is a repudiation of that proposition. It is well for them to give any explanation for why they did no renovation for 4.5 years. But it behooves them to come in here when the Prime Minister went and looked at the place beforehand. So Dr. Darwell, the member for Tall Pines, had no problems persuading him as Minister of Finance that this money had to be spent. And then he goes back, like all good Family Island people do, to see how the work is going, along with Dr. Darwell. That should be applauded rather than criticized. And I'm not going to be too long, because I know Kalani don't like to be in here long, so I can be very short. No, I can be short so we can sit and listen to you. So, Madam Speaker, we heard an interesting thing. We know in this country, listening to the doctors, and Kalani is one, so I know he ain't gonna disagree with this, that we are digging our graves with our spoons in this country. I've heard many doctors say that. Many, many doctors. That at the end of the day, where diabetes is rampant in this country, sugary drinks cannot be good. When hypertension, and East Grand Bahama, I suffer along with you, is rampant in this country, salty foods cannot be good. When obesity is rampant in this country, and I saw some photos of myself yesterday, and I seem to be getting a little problem with that as well, fully recovered. But at the end of the day, the fact that we cannot have a sensible discussion other than it being reduced to political back and forth about new taxes or old taxes, about whether we should seek to help our people avoid bad choices in how we tax food. We already have a prohibitive tax on alcohol because we decide it's bad for you. We not only have a tax on tobacco and tobacco products, we have an excise duty per stick for cigar or per packet of cigarettes because we decide it's bad for you. And so to hear what is a debate about something serious reduced to those terms is in fact troubling. I share East Grand Bahama's view that you should make healthy food less expensive. That is exactly what we did when we reduced VAT on fruits, on other healthy foods. That has happened. And it is a shame that no focus is given on the fact that the VAT reduction fell on all of the healthy foods that people should be consuming. And instead, there's a very narrow focus on what had went on. Lord, I pray for the day that the side opposite could add to their mantra a VAT on bread basket fruit, a mantra of a reduction of VAT on healthy foods like fruit, like water, like all the healthy options that VAT was reduced on. I don't hold out much hope, Lord, but I'm a praying man, so I will continue to pray. Before I move to a specific look at this act, because my colleague did a very good job. the discourse about the insurance companies very usefully demonstrates the difference between this side and that side. The member for East Grand Bahama referred to an article where the insurance company spoke about the shock that we could expect from what is required, what is called the new treatment by the Ministry of Finance, and it's under an article, Patients Have Warned, Brace for the VAT Shock. Now, what is interesting, I place no value in the objectivity of our fourth estate necessarily, but this one is very interesting, Madam Speaker.
Why you hired all of them?
East Grand Bahama is an attorney just like myself. When I was in the UK, Madam Speaker, I actually did the elective revenue law because I thought that at some point we would get into matters of revenue here more than we were previously. And really and truly, what I discovered during the course of the course is that large companies and industries like the insurance industry, like the clearing banks, all hire lawyers to advise them on tax. And they pay a lot of money to these lawyers to advise them on tax. And they seek to organize their business to get maximum benefit from any existing tax regime. And it was said on this side that we look out for the small man because the rich and powerful insurance lobby can clearly look out for themselves and can clearly hire lawyers to look out for themselves. The concluding paragraph of this article is instructive because it says, one insurance source, though speaking on condition of anonymity, said, the Department of Inland Revenue has changed its interpretation of what the law is. It hasn't changed the law. What they're saying is that insurance companies are not the beneficiaries of the services, and as such, the insurance company are not to claim back the VAT related to any payout. If the insurers are not the one receiving the service, then one doing so has to pay the VAT. Earlier in this article, it was said that the insurance companies, the Ministry of Finance said, were claiming back the 10%. And so all of us don't have insurance. So to take East Grand Bahama's point, if two Bahamians have a $50,000 procedure, one covered by insurance and one not covered by insurance, VAT applies to the procedure for both. Equally so, the fact that you will have an insurance company to help you pay your bill does not eliminate the VAT. And so the sum would be payable, one would think, by the uninsured and the insured alike. And so I fail to see how this could be anything other than what the Ministry of Finance has said, and that the insurers were claiming back the VAT they were paying and offsetting it against VAT due from them. And so they were taking monies that were not theirs to offset against tax that they owed. Nothing at all to affect the price of the service being rendered. Everything to affect their VAT returns to the Treasury. Now, doesn't take a clever lawyer if the Department of Inland Revenue is wrong to tell the insurance industry that in the case of one insurance company, it is said that this amounted to $10 million. that for a fraction of $10 million, we would vindicate your argument that they are wrong. Because I would hope, Madam Speaker, that all of us who spend hours and hours in here debating the laws would expect that people would obey the laws that this Parliament has determined should govern this land. On this side, certainly, for myself, Madam Speaker, and I can only speak for myself, the time that we take to consider these bills, and I'm made to understand that there's a consideration of the member's point about the limitation of district, that it behooves the other side to say that for an industry, a powerful industry, a moneyed industry, an industry that has a brigade of lawyers from the top law firms in this country, that they need somehow consideration from us as opposed to looking after their own interests. If the other side wishes to advance some amendment, they can do that. But to suggest that the Ministry of Finance and the Department of Inland Revenue, to quote the insurance source, has not changed the law, that means that if they're correct, the insurance industry has been in breach of the law for quite some time. That's the sum total of it. I've heard what has fallen from the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, and he's a reasonable, conciliatory man, and I suppose they could drop the hammer on them, but they have spoken and decided not to.
The chair recognizes the honorable.
Madam Speaker, I do not wish to, it to be left, or the impression to be left, that the reason why we raised the concern was on behalf of the insurance industry. The reason why we raised the concern is that we are demanding that the government protect the consumer and that the government protect the insured. That is the main issue, and to protect them from having to pay additional cost. That is the point that is being raised, and I accept what the Prime Minister has said, that they, that's why I wanted to make sure that that point is made clear, that we are speaking on behalf of the consumer. We are speaking on behalf of the people, those persons that have to pay, that will have to pay the additional VAT. That is who we are speaking to protect.
You gotta pay more.
Thank you, honorable member.
You gotta pay 10% on 100% as opposed to 10%.
Madam Speaker, I hear what has fallen from East Grand Bahama, and that gives an impression that they are completely impotent to engage with the insurance industry. If they're concerned about something being passed on,
I'm not impotent, Madam
they,
Speaker.
well, Madam Speaker, I guess having worked with Sinaz, I should have expected that. But they seem to be saying that they have this concern. Anytime personally I hear a bank, I hear an insurance company, I hear anyone powerful talking about having to pass on anything to the small man, my first inquiry is, let me look at your profits, because you claim that you have to pass this on. Unless they're saying that they don't have any, I was going to use a word, but I guess I better just use conversation. Unless they're saying they don't have conversations with them, unless they're saying that they can't come here and advance blow by blow why this would have to be passed on. I hear what he says, And I'm glad that the record would note that they must be accepting that this side is being very conscientious in what we are doing. Now, Madam Speaker, having said that, I support the nurses and midwives bill for all of the reasons set out by the member for Tall Pines. As I've said, Madam Speaker, I have engaged him on certain discussions. And it's a very practical thing in this archipelago that the Royal Bahamas Defense Force have ships at sea, has outposts on some remote islands, and always details a medic who is trained in ENT to serve at those sites. I look forward to the day, Madam Speaker, when, in consultation and collaboration with the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the medical personnel of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, who already have 6 registered nurses in their strength, can be boosted so that on every vessel, at every detachment station, is somebody registered by the Nursing Council. You see, there will never be a resident doctor in Ragged Island. There will always be a nurse, and doing the very same thing that the member for Tall Pines has set out. And so this bill is timely. And let me say this, Madam Speaker, and again, I hope it is taken in the way it is positive. The bill that this repeals, if I'm not mistaken, predates independence. So it predates independence. On this road to 50, we are upgrading yet again the legislation in this country to bring institutions into the modern day. So from 1971, there would have been a lot of pondering and thinking surrounding this subject matter. It takes this Davis Cooper administration to get it done. Listening to the Minister of Health and Wellness, he will get the renovations done to the hospitals, to the clinics, and he will do what is necessary to bring health care along appropriately as we march forward, onward, upward together on this road to 50. So let it be said without equivocation, Madam Speaker, that when the other side begins by these lofty, we are all looking out for the well-being of our country, I would trust that they continue in a vein that is consistent with that declaration and is not diametrically opposed to that. I shouldn't say we, I should speak for myself. I don't think that they're inherently wicked and evil. And so I detest when they seem to suggest somehow that we are inherently wicked and evil, and I rebuke that, Madam Speaker. On that note, Freetown supports this bill.
Thank you, Honourable Member Asmini. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Long Island.
Madam Speaker, I rise on behalf of the wonderful people of Long Island, the most industrious people, the people who I love and cherish, and my fellow islanders, on behalf of my fellow islanders, who I am proud and privileged to serve. Madam Speaker, I begin by extending condolences to the family of Miss Mavis Carroll. Miss Mavis was a pillar of strength for me. She was the consummate supporter. She was one way all the time and always had a positive word of encouragement, always smiling and hugging and so loving. Miss Mavis, I will miss you, ma'am. Thank you for everything. I extend my sympathies to her entire family. May she rest in peace. Madam Speaker, I also extend condolences, sympathies to Miss Delilah Tai and her family, including her brother Kenneth, on the passing of her husband, Mr. Hugh Tai. Delilah, my prayers are with you. Madam Speaker, I extend condolences to Mrs. Elva Tynequest and her family on the passing of Mr. Nolvin Tynequest and to the family of the late Mr. Charles Taylor. Madam Speaker, my heart is so very heavy today. Nearly 2 weeks ago, I lost a very close family member. My first cousin, who was like a brother, Shad Gibson. Everybody called him Shaddy. Shaddy was like a brother, a trusted confidant, my go-to person, ride or die, as the young people say. And if he was with you, Madam Speaker, he was 100% with you. If he was not with you, well, you get the picture. But what you see was what you got. There's never been a time when I have called upon him and sought his help. I never got an excuse. In another capacity, Rashad was another of my constituents. My constituent. He was the road traffic inspector for North Long Island, and the best bartender in the world. Madam Speaker, his unexpected passing has devastated us all. Grief and heartbreak are feelings we become very familiar with during these times. And I've heard about students being sent home from the high school when word got out of his passing. We've seen the outpouring of love on the island, social media, and across the archipelago. We thank you. It is true that what we do in life echoes in eternity, and Rashad's life and now his death, and the response by people far and wide speaks to that. Shadi touched my heart profoundly. His sudden exit from this plane knocked us all off of our feet. Death leaves a painful and unfamiliar emptiness, Madam Speaker. And sadly, no matter how cautiously you live, there's no escaping the fatal clutches of death. It comes along with no apology. I can hear his infectious laugh. I can hear his jokes and visualize his movements and playful demeanor. Rashad had a heart of gold, was free-handed and never thought anything was too good to give to his friends and family, loved his family dearly, and was fiercely defensive, or a fierce defender of all of us. Although only 33, Shadi lived a full and vibrant life. I have so many wonderful memories. And so Long Island has lost a gem. Our family has lost a loving son, grandson, brother, cousin. He could easily be considered as the glue of the family, our famous grill man at our get-togethers. So do keep our family in your thoughts and prayers. And so Shadi, you lived a life of humility and service to those you loved and cherished. I love you, brother. We love you. Dance with the angels, my brother. You've now joined the ancestors, your father, my dear uncle, your Grammy Lula, and Aunt Eklund. And what a joyful reunion that must have been. Rest in paradise. You've now seen the other side. You've traveled a journey that we all must trek one of these days. Farewell, my dear brother, and may you find safe harbor. Rest in power, brother. Rest in peace until we see each other again. Fly high. Madam Speaker, I support this bill. This bill is a modernization of the Nurses and Midwives Act. Frankly, it is an administrative piece of legislation on the management of the profession, from licensing to being registered to the operation of the Nursing Council to complaints, investigations, and appeals. I support raising the entry level of registered nurses and continuous education, and continuous training. Perhaps supplemental regulation or policy can settle the governing structure of what nurse practitioners can do. And that is something maybe the minister would consider in the future. Indeed, Madam Speaker, the old Nursing Act is very limited in terms of the scope of work of nurses. Madam Speaker, I have family members and friends who are nurses. I know that nurses, like educators, are poorly compensated. And unfortunately, we haven't changed the job satisfaction of nurses. And that is why many of them continue to leave in droves. And nurses are the single most important part, and this is doctors telling me this. Nurses are the single most important part of the team. We still have massive deficiencies in critical care nursing areas. Until you address these problems, which this bill doesn't address at this time, we will be no further ahead. Madam Speaker, I believe it's more than just money for the nurses, based on what I've heard. I think it's about the conditions of service, the quality or perceived quality of the insurance, the fact that nurses are professionals, yet many of them can't afford to buy a home or a car. We must get serious about raising the pay of nurses. They're grossly underpaid, just like teachers. You know, I saw an ad some time ago from Central Florida, recruiting on nurses and offering a salary of some $9,000 plus per month, plus perks. Until recently, a nurse with a 4-year degree came in making $2,000 per month. That's before NIB and union dues. Since the last agreement was signed, they're now making $2,166 per month before NIB and union dues. Madam Speaker, when you consider that some jurisdictions start offering in the $60,000 and may assist with housing and school fee for children and other incentives, you know, many of them are going to make a run for it because they're looking at being able to make a decent living. Madam Speaker, is there any wonder that we see the exodus of nurses from the Bahamas and the recruitment in other jurisdictions? One of the queries I have is what would be the ratio of nurses that leave, given each graduating class, versus the ones that are retained? And does this improve service experience, this departure, or does this act improve the service experience at PMH? Will this experience increase to an optimal level? Madam Speaker, what needs to happen is that nurses and the role that they play must be brought into the 21st century and moved away from the old-fashioned practices. What is the comprehensive plan to ensure we retain our nurses? How can we ensure that we have a sustainable projects to attract talented young Bahamians to become nurses? How do we provide a healthcare system that is conducive for them to work in? How effective is the Nurses Cadet program? How many of these persons who are in the Nurses Cadet actually accept scholarships to become nurses, and how many of them remain in the system? Because I'm told, Madam Speaker, that an average of 40 to 60 nurses leave per year for recruitment to the United States and Canada. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, given that nurses continue to operate under traditional practice guidelines, we have to look at elevating them or creating other paths. You know, many nurses complain about elevation or the paths to elevation being limited. Some could be midwives, but it's limited. So if we're going to retain nurses, we need more clinical pathways. As, for example, nurses that may be specialist nurses for ICU, dialysis, and ER, and the operating room. And I'm sure Dr. Darwell has an appreciation for what I'm saying. So nurses interested in these arenas should be able to enjoy advancement by virtue of multiple parallel paths. Madam Speaker, nurses in training, I believe, should be covered by NIB as it stands, because many of them go into the hospital and they help the registered nurse. So as it stands, if they're injured on the job, they're not covered. Moreover, Madam Speaker, I believe that nurses in the final year of their studies should be treated as nursing interns at the hospital. We must develop a sustainable, rational approach to healthcare financing that will get us closer to the concept of universal access to healthcare. As I said during the debate on the Mental Health Act, I also hope we move to modernize healthcare legislation, and I welcome this bill today. Because, as we seek to, obviously, we came with a new Mental Health Care Act, or Mental Health Act. Now we're dealing with nurses and midwives. And so let's seek to update the Medical Act, the Dental Act, and move primary health care and universal health care forward. Indeed, as I've raised here before, the Vaccination Act needs to be updated. We recently promoted and carried out widespread vaccination exercises for COVID-19 under an act that was passed into existence in 1865. 1865. So, Madam Speaker, these pieces of legislation are all in dire need of being revamped and brought into the 21st century. Madam Speaker, we are facing a crisis in healthcare here in the Bahamas. Healthcare reform is overdue. Healthcare must be a priority. Every day, sick Bahamians have to go to substandard healthcare facilities. And frankly, there's low staff morale. Just ask them. Just ask around. Madam Speaker, the government, whether PLP or FNM, has a task to provide decent health care to Bahamians. At present, clearly the Princess Margaret Hospital is stretched thin. There's a seeming lack of human capital. Madam Speaker, to be frank, the Princess Margaret Hospital is in a deplorable state and, in many instances, gives off an aura of sickness and death, hardly one for persons wanting to return to a hale and healthy state, or one that reflects an efficient operation. Madam Speaker, let me say, we are very dedicated, hard-working healthcare workers at PMH and across the health sector in the Bahamas, and I truly appreciate them. So this does not, what I'm about to say does not apply to them, those ones. There's a reason why many of them are being courted by other countries. And I don't wish to bash our healthcare workers, our essential workers. I understand their frustrations and that they can only do their best at what is available to them. However, Madam Speaker, there's much to be desired. There's the tardy response to patients. There are the grimy and foul-smelling bathrooms and the unkempt elevators, in addition to the ogre-like behavior of certain staff members and the petulant and inhospitable conduct of certain healthcare professionals. An air of ineptitude and narrow-mindedness only add to the depressing reality of the appalling state of affairs at PMH. I have been over the years, and I know there's others, who, when it's a family member or someone there, pick up the phone and you try to call the minister who might be in charge, or you call a doctor you might know in there, or a few nurses, or you try to contact someone to go and check on your family member, to make sure your family member is getting care. Because we know about the intolerable and callous attitudes that some display and show persons who are sick. You can imagine being sick on your dying bed or in the throes of illness, and persons are speaking to you in a condescending, disrespectful manner. Should never be. Should never be. So, Madam Speaker, these disrespectful tones, poor attitudes, and neglect that Bahamians are subjected to at PMH are abhorrent, horrific, and should never be visited upon persons who are desperately looking for help, who are sick, who are in their last hours, their last moments on this earth. My God, have a heart. Madam Speaker, I saw a video of my cousin sweating, ignored, dying, unbeknownst to us. I've been trying to reach out to the Minister of Health, and I'm looking forward to having a chat with you, sir. In the throes of his final hours. Neglect. Neglect. Just, when you talk about persons warehousing, when PMH is referred to as being the institution that warehouses people, that's not a good reputation. Where folks are referred to as being desensitized, staff are desensitized to sickness and death. When there's a lack of love and lack of care and a lack of compassion. How are you going to tell us? This is not political, my brother. This is real. This is real. This is real. I've been saying this for years, and I'm not going to be distracted today. How are you going to tell us that you found Shadi dead, that you found him unresponsive, that you found him in a hospital after he flew from Long Island to Nassau to be cared for? How? How could this have happened? How could this have happened to a 33-year-old man who was otherwise striving and living a productive life? How? We would like to know what happened. They refer to as a coroner's case. We await the details. Speaker, the government, any government, given the barrage of complaints that come from our health facilities, there must be a complete revamp of the administration of healthcare in the Bahamas. There must also be an assessment of all healthcare professionals to determine their level of proficiency and efficiency. There must be constant training and retraining. Madam Speaker, frankly, such a paradigm shift would eliminate the standard of lifetime employment or being stationed at a particular place, instead replacing this with a model of continuous rotation and replacement, rotating staff with a constant rotation of young and bright and eager minds being cross-fertilized in an environment of academic and clinical inquiry and excellence. Madam Speaker, last night and again this morning, I spoke to my constituent, Mr. Ernest Watson. Mr. Watson is currently at PMH, and he asked me to speak for him and to tell his story. Mr. Watson is a businessman in Long Island, operating a beautiful restaurant and bar on Gordon's Beach. When you come up, I will take you there, Madam Speaker. He's not been able to make a dime at this time. This is his 5th week at PMH. He was made to wait 4 weeks before he was able to have his first surgery. And now, given how he was handled, he tells me that he would likely need another surgery on his hand because it is limp. He referred to it, this is his words, not mine, as an animal zone. He said he came in there and had COVID, contracted COVID during the time he's been there. Said for 10 days he had COVID and had to go in the COVID unit. He told me that he saw 10 people die in his ward in the weeks that he's been there. And he's complained about the degree of care he's received. Told me to make note that he's on male surgical 3, and he's having a daily bad diet every day, eating rice and chicken, and quote him, hard grits in the morning. He says he told him that he cannot eat hard rice, and it has caused him constipation. He's asked me to say this. So I asked Mr. Ernest Watson, is given attention. Just like everyone else in the hospital, I request the same, but I want to particularly highlight Mr. Watson. Madam Speaker, when I was growing up, we had a nurse in Long Island, Nurse Inez Spence. Oh, a wonderful lady. She was a super nurse. She was a doctor and a nurse all rolled into one. And I wish that consideration would be had for bringing her back to consult and train nurses, not just on my island, but elsewhere. She's a living legend, a living resource, one of the greatest healthcare professionals in this country. And I think she was recently honored by the government. I've known her since I was a child. The first needles I remember her giving them to me and tricking me, because you're scared of needles, to give it. She was stern but loving, motherly, and God-fearing. Madam Speaker, given the instances of malpractice or perceived malpractice, neglect, and questionable deaths, who has been reprimanded? Whose licenses have been revoked? Hardly anyone, if anyone at all. Madam Speaker, I recently went to a funeral home, and there I saw a woman and her baby. She died, both died during childbirth. In these times in the 21st century, should this still be happening at PMH? How many people die in there every year, go in there for a small thing, and come out in a body bag? What's the count? Bahamians must start launching medical negligence and malpractice lawsuits to get answers. Speaker, frankly, it appears that medical negligence usually goes unreported in the Bahamas and disavowed, and is disavowed whenever questions arise. Indeed, if you listen to certain persons, you would think that look, all of us in our various professions, we're not perfect. But you would think that certain medical staff, or all medical staff, are perfect and they make no mistakes, but that nothing happens. Why isn't there a local medical watchdog on these issues? By and large, there appears to be a lack of accountability at PMH. And like I said earlier, the quality of care must be better. It must be better. It must be better than what Bahamians are experiencing now. It must be much better than what Bahamians are experiencing now. And we must decentralize healthcare. Right now, I got out of the constituency fund, about to pay to bring a child and his mother from Long Island to Nassau to get services here. Madam Speaker, the Princess Margaret Hospital is supposed to be the flagship institution of healthcare in the Bahamas. And I believe, however, I believe it exemplifies everything that is wrong with the healthcare system in the Bahamas. Now to stretch decades with patchwork being done here and there. In the emergency department at PMH, people are stacked like sardines, 3 or 4 deep. The dehumanization that results as people wait for hours and hours, even days, to be seen, assessed, and admitted should not continue. The coexistence of private and public care in the same country, in our country, and on this island, are yards apart. Indeed, within PMH itself, you have institutionalized segregation because you have private wards and public wards. So separate, no matter how it's like, separate is never equal. Fundamentally, we maintain a form of medical apartheid. And we pretend that the model of public and private medicine coexisting, our current and traditional approach, makes sense. As I said, separate is never equal. So while there's care that's being provided, it's difficult to appreciate the quality of that care in a general environment that conjures up a feeling of squalor. There are persons waiting on long lines for x-rays and lab tests and surgery and clinics, and delivery of babies, and to use bathrooms, and in the emergency room queues at PMH. The parking is inadequate and suggests that we have not adjusted the care delivered at PMH to the demands of the 21st century. The experience of elderly family island patients, like my constituents, who must interact with the clinics and services at PMH, continue to leave much to be desired. PMH remains a less than welcoming place for family island and elderly patients. The clinics at PMH continue to function on a first come, first served basis. Why should this continue in 2023? Why isn't there a proper appointment system where patients have an appointment to see a particular doctor at a particular time, as opposed to people having to on in and out, go in and out, or come in there and spend the entire day waiting? As the largest healthcare institution in the country, PMH should be the site of basic and clinical research. It should be a regional leader in resident and student education. And it should not only serve to provide the basis of national self-sufficiency in all clinical areas, but also to provide training for the rest of the region. This has not been done, Madam Speaker. We must move beyond the myopic view that we have of PMH's mandate and its current role. If this view of what could be a gem of our scientific and clinical endeavors was to be appropriately outfitted, the leadership of the Bahamas would be seen in medical and healthcare environment, just as we are in sports and athletics and culture. Alas, the institution that is PMH limps along and is barely able to show glimpses of its potential. Now, Speaker, we have to rethink and indeed discard the current view of healthcare and PMH and replace it with a more progressive and ambitious view that serves not only the clinical demands of a changing time, but forms an integral part of the training of our doctors. And I know we train doctors did not, but I'm thinking these John Hopkins and those clinics, hospitals, and universities. We must do so, Madam Speaker, take this new approach in order to achieve a shared vision of universal healthcare and to improve our healthcare indices. Madam Speaker, when will the concept of medical apartheid be eliminated? Where hospital staff, I am told, segregate patients into public patient versus private patient, where access to essential services is based on whether a patient has, for the best services, whether a patient has insurance, who has money. Okay, Mr. Watson told me this morning that he sit there and just watches as persons are asked, do you have insurance? I'll tell your family to borrow some money and come private. Being done by public health officials. Okay? Sad that this is happening. Sad that this is happening. And what has happened, Madam Speaker? What has happened, Madam Speaker? This, when you think about these kinds of things, patients, if we live in the real world, just gotta speak to the patients there. Patients being asked these questions. But that should never happen in the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, what happened to the patient care coordinators who were supposed to reduce overcrowding and congestion at the hospital, alleviating the jam-packed scenes at accident and emergency? There must be an enhancement of communication between staff, patients, and the families of patients who are all dissatisfied with the lack of information and the impolite behavior of personnel. It must also be noted, Madam Speaker, and I want to say this again, that no matter how tired some nurses and doctors are, they're good-natured, extremely kind, and most accommodating, but there are those who leave much to be desired. Madam Speaker, I would encourage the minister to consider having the Department of Health ensure that psychiatrists and psychologists are constantly available for personnel who may need counseling with personal or work-related matters that don't affect their attitude in dealing with sick patients. And to further ensure that nurses and doctors and other personnel undergo mandatory training seminars, exercises to assist them with managing stress and providing quality health care. Understandably, the work environment at PMH may not be the best, but it is no excuse for many of the gaps in the healthcare system. Moreover, Madam Speaker, the department must ensure that the hospital is adequately staffed and the clinics throughout the islands, since skeletal staffing, even when you look at shift rotation, would only cause burnout, fatigue, and job dissatisfaction, and yield negative outcomes and lower quality health care. So, Madam Speaker, and the same applies to all times to the institution of a data collection system at PMH. And that is, when I say that, I mean there's a dire need for a properly functioning electronic integrated public health information management system that encompasses the entire archipelago. Madam Speaker, at present, the Bahamas does not have a national blood bank. We don't. When will that be fixed? Okay, so that we don't see persons asking folks to go out there. And Madam Speaker, I would request just another 3 minutes, 5 minutes, Madam Speaker.
Five minutes. Wrap up in a minute for me, please.
Thank you, ma'am.
In a minute.
Ma'am?
5. Wrap up in a minute for me, please.
All right, no problem, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you know, and I want to speak to the community healthcare centers, particularly like those in Long Island. We're in dire need of improvements to our health plant in Long Island, in dire need of improvements and upgrades to the Sims Clinic, and the construction of a state-of-the-art clinic in McKinsey's, which we know the last administration had gotten an IDB loan for. Now, Speaker, we currently have a medication shortage on Long Island. You know, one Long Islander called me on Monday from the Sims Clinic and told me that they had no insulin, okay, no critical medication, and no doubt the same applies to the Debminski Clinic. It is unbelievable that we have to wait so long for emergency flights. And you know, when that changed, I think one of the things has to happen, because we have persons on Long Island who are planes. So allow these folks to be able to fly persons to Nassau, as it used to happen, with nurses, to get them critical care rather than having to wait for a flight to fly from Nassau to Long Island back to Nassau, 1 hour each way, and persons, persons dying or succumbing to their injury or ailment en route. So, Madam Speaker, as I close, I know there are many trained and retired medical professionals, both local and foreign, who are willing to lend support to the people of Long Island as it relates to medical care, and I hope that we can make that happen. There are persons, Madam Speaker, who've offered donations to the clinic, and they have told me that they've been refused, and I hope that would be reconsidered as well. So, Madam Speaker, let's decentralize healthcare. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Anne's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it was once said before by Winston Churchill after the Battle of Britain that never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. And Madam Speaker, when we think about our doctors and nurses, our first-line workers that battle the pandemic of COVID-19, deal every day with the conditions at Princess Margaret Hospital and in the clinics throughout New Providence and the Family Islands, Madam Speaker, I confidently say that never in the field of healthcare was so much owed by so many to so few. And it is my honor to be a member of His Majesty's loyal opposition today to support this bill before the House, the Nurses and Midwives Bill of 2002. This is a bill that will amend and repeal the previous legislation brought into force in 1971. And according to nurses that I've had the opportunity to speak with, along with other members of the opposition, is supported by one and all. It is something that they've seen as having been overdue. The final draft of this legislation that's now going to be passed in this House and as well as in the Senate was finalized in 2020, and it's made before our attention as legislators today. Madam Speaker, there are several things that this piece of legislation does that's of interest to members in the community. Roughly 15 to 20 years ago, there were a number of nurses that went away and received the qualification and came back qualified as advanced practice nurses. But, Madam Speaker, until the passage of this legislation, they weren't by law authorized to carry out the jobs that they had been trained for, the functions that could have assisted our communities with the delivery of healthcare services for one and all. But, Madam Speaker, that is one thing that this legislation will do. And another important thing is there are what we recognize as registered nurses. These are our licensed practical nurses. And then there are what many of us probably don't understand unauthorized or unlicensed nurses, a lot of them being caregivers that you'll find coming to your home if you have an elderly person there, or sometimes if you have a particular type of injury, they may come and assist with bandaging or redoing the bandage on there. Why it's important for for the country, I think was highlighted by the member for Tall Pines earlier, is that when we're looking to manage the resources that we have in healthcare, we need to know, not only do we need to give those persons, the advanced practical nurses, the authority to act, but we need to know who else is out there acting, where they're acting, which is why I expect the districts have been identified in the legislation, and how many more are we going to need on an annual basis, every other year basis, knowing that we have people coming out of high schools, knowing that we have people wanting to sit courses at University of Bahamas, take certifications from other private organizations, and knowing that there is this international demand.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Sinans.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And knowing that there is this international demand where we are almost losing young nurses to Canada and to the United States as quickly as they're trained here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I've never been an advocate against the brain drain. Honestly, I don't believe that it's a reality that we have to manage here. If persons are qualified to find employment opportunities outside of the Bahamas, then they still and will always be Bahamian. But they'll find opportunities that may be better for them at that particular time in their life, or maybe better for the Bahamas at the end of the day because of the relationships that they develop essentially as ambassadors on our behalf when they go abroad. They'll be exposed, they're likely to be exposed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to, in the case of medicine, techniques and opportunities that we don't have back home. And we will find that those persons that do go abroad, a high percentage, a majority, will likely feed those ideas, those relationships back toward the Bahamas, which at the end of the day will continue to see that we make inroads and strides to improve our overall healthcare product here. I know that the nurses are now going to be pleased with this legislation being passed, and I say that in full knowledge that there have been multiple complaints by citizens that visit Princess Margaret Hospital, that go into the hospital expecting a level of service that they're not receiving, and in the most unfortunate cases have devastating losses as a result of loved ones not leaving alive. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there will always be cases where persons enter into a hospital, no matter what part of the world that they're in, and some of them, unfortunately, Mr. Deputy Speaker, won't come out. But we have to, as Bahamians, as we're going into the 50th year of independence, find ways in which we can all hold ourselves responsible and accountable. This piece of legislation speaks to what the nurses will be doing. The different degrees will go through possible annual certification and training. But how are we training the customers, the clients of the hospital? How are we as Bahamians improving or increasing our understanding of what to expect when we go to PMH? How can we assist the service relationship by possibly managing our own healthcare before we get there better, eating healthier, exercising more, knowing that There are clinics on the island that can do certain treatments. And if I come into those categories, I'm going to go to the clinic first. All of these things, I think, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are important to our national development. If we look at healthcare, the Prime Minister said this is going to be a primary focus for his administration. If we look at education, if we look at levels of crime, if we look at employment and tourism, if we look at the key factors that control the growth of our nation, we should, Mr. Deputy Speaker, accept that where we find them today is where we must meet them, and we must move forward together. I would think it would be beneficial, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if the government and the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, National Security, Trade and Industry, Tourism, were to give the constituents and the citizens of the Commonwealth of Bahamas a month where there is a focus on a particular area of national development. So if we had a month to focus on our health and wellness, not only will we market to residents what are healthy living standards, healthy living practices, but we could also advise and market to them what Princess Margaret Hospital provides in terms of services. If you have insurance, this is what you can expect. If you don't have insurance, this is what you can expect. And we can be honest with ourselves, even if it is overly critical. We can tell the public the average wait time. We can tell the public the number of persons per room. We can tell the public the number of medications that are regularly available, so that when they get to the hospital, they're not confronted with the greatest shock of their life in what is, at that time, possibly the most trying time of their life, as a loved one is fighting for their health, possibly fighting for their life. We can't sit back as citizens, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and just say that we expected things to be different. If we expect things to be different without knowing the way that they actually are, we're not benefiting ourselves, we're not allowing our families to be prepared for what they will encounter. And as far as the medical industry, the doctors and nurses and the Public Hospitals Authority at our public hospitals and clinics are concerned, when they have this information that they can share it with the general public, they'll have this information now that they can begin to assess how they're going to improve on the conditions at the hospital. It won't be a situation of, well, I'm a citizen, I pay my taxes, I'm expecting this from you. If you can't deliver it, I don't want you to tell me that that's what I should expect. I want you to tell me what I should expect as a citizen expecting public health care services. If it's not acceptable to me, then we're going to work together with the policymakers, with the Ministry of Health, with the doctors and the nurses, with the lab technicians to bring the standard of service up. Because as we go into the next 50 years as our country, we don't want to continue to be complaining that we haven't progressed or that it's a political issue, this party is responsible for it. No, we aren't responsible for it, you're responsible for it. We kicked the can down the road, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and never change the place that we are. I don't want, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as a young parliamentarian, 44 years old, family of 2 sons, married to a lovely woman, to look back in the next 20 years and think that we are in fact still dealing with one hospital at PMH that's overcrowded. We're dealing with a situation where citizens are continuously feeling let down by the service that they receive from our medical practitioners. Across the board, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we need to make changes that are for the benefit and improvement at a rapid pace of not only our professionals, but for the public at large. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I know that for the nurses, they're pleased with this legislation that's been passed here today. But for me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and for some of my colleagues that have raised concerns with the level of service at Princess Margaret Hospital, we must as one people understand what our failures are, how we're going to improve them, and that it's not a situation where it's one person's responsibility and not the responsibility of all. We have to be disciplined in this, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm going to end my contribution to the bill there. I would like to speak to a few other things that have happened in my constituency. First, I would like to extend condolences to a longtime friend, a gentleman who was killed, shot about 5 times on January 26th off of Johnson Road, just in front of the entrance to Johnson Terrace. When I came out of law school, I moved into Johnson Terrace, and just about every day that I would exit that community into the greater St. Anne's area, this young man who went by the alias of Bucket would be on his property opposite. Bucket was very quiet and reserved. He was, in my view, a no-nonsense guy, but he never caused trouble for anybody, and it's really going to be a loss for the Johnson Road community, for the St. Anne's community, not to have him around anymore. Growing up through Johnson Road, there was probably between Johnson Road and Step Street, 20 young men that were about my age, maybe 5 years younger, no more than 10 years. And it's really horrifying to accept that just about all of them have gone. You can be on a strip that's less than a mile, and unfortunately conflicts for whatever reason arise, and you'll find, I know of 3 cases where someone who lived less than 800 yards from another person killed that person. And it goes back and forth to where some families that have 3 young men in the family no longer have either any young men in the family that are alive, or if there is one alive, he's in prison because he took vengeance upon another family that likely has some relation to one another down the road. But honestly, roughly 20 young men from the time that I was a 22-year-old to being 44 now have died in that Johnson Road, Step Street area. Johnson Road is in St. Anne's. I don't think that anybody ever gives consideration to the amount of shootings and deaths that happen in the St. Anne's constituency. We're often overlooked as being a community that doesn't have such issues, but Bucket died on January 26th of 2023. Within 3 months of Bucket's death, we also had the death of a gentleman on St. Anne's Crescent, that's off of Culbert's Hill in the Winton neighborhood community. This young man was chased down the road and was shot before he could get to the end of the road where the stop sign was. He was shot and killed. He was murdered on December 15th of 2022. Before that individual passed, we had Miss Patrice Sawyer. Miss Patrice Sawyer lived 4 houses, 4 buildings away from where Bucket lived. Miss Patrice Sawyer was shot in her driveway. She came out early in the morning to a call, and she was shot in her driveway. She lived on the property with her parents. Her brother had been shot and murdered some years before while at the Judy Tree nightclub, which is no longer around. But within 3 months in St. Anne's, you had Bucket shot to death, you had this gentleman shot on St. Anne's Crescent, and you had Miss Patrice Sawyer shot right in her driveway. I don't want anyone to ever think that the troubles that they find in constituencies over the hill aren't alive in the St. Anne's constituency. And it should never be that we accept such troubles over the hill or in St. Anne's, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is a national issue. It's a crisis, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We live in what we advertise as paradise. But I don't think that paradise, true paradise, Mr. Deputy Speaker, has so many people being killed. We have to work, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on that as well as we go into the next 50 years. Mr. Deputy Speaker, recently we've had the loss of two great men, Dr. Timothy Barrett being one of these great men. Dr. Timothy Barrett had been a psychiatrist. He had given over 30 years of his life to his profession. He had a holistic practice that many persons have known family members that have benefited from his practice. He was also an author. Actually, I think he published a book, maybe a second or third book, just before he would have passed away. He was proud of the life that he had lived. He was proud of his family. He was also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, an All-American athlete, having attended the University of Southern California. He passed away, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on the 20th of January at Doctors Hospital. He's going to be missed by many. Another distinguished gentleman that passed away with a number of family members living in the St. Anne's constituency is the first Commodore of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, retired Commodore Leon Livingston Smith, Sr. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when you think of people that live on the front line, people that give of themselves, that would have fought the good fight, Mr. Deputy Speaker, a gentleman like retired Commodore Leon Livingston Smith, Sr. is definitely one of those men. I know that he'll be missed by his family, and I trust that this administration, if they don't have plans already, will look to find some way to honor him so that his legacy as the first Commodore of our Royal Bahamas Defense Force will be a legacy that is known to young Bahamians alive and still to be born. Mr. Deputy Speaker, on the point of legacy, we all know that the 50th anniversary for the Golden Jubilee is one nation, our legacy, and our future. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, Leon Livingston Smith Sr. is a big part of that legacy. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is a gentleman that died yesterday. Now, his name is Angelo Major. He was the son of Angela Donna Major Knowles, a relative of infamous 90 Knowles. Angela Donna Major Knowles died many years ago. And this young man, Angelo Major, was raised by a close friend of mine, Miss Prescola Hall. It was devastating news for her family. They were up until 3 p.m. this morning grieving, 3 a.m. this morning grieving, and I don't think the loss is ever going to leave them. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we cannot continue to sit where we are and not strive to do more when so many young men are being killed, when so many families are being impacted by the death of their loved ones. It's my understanding from information that 2 men were taken into custody, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and one of these men, I believe both, but one of these men was out on bail for murder. He had murdered in January of 2022. 1 year later, one more life gone. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I close, I'd like to thank those participants that came out to the St. Anne's Community Service Day, which is the last Saturday of every month, started in January of 2023. We were out at the waterfront property in front of Fort Winton. Fort Winton is in the Eastern District. It's before Solomon's Lighthouse along Eastern Road, and it's actually accessed off of Winton Highway. It's a old fort battery that up until roughly 10 years ago still had an old massive cannon on it when there was a big metals industry going on here, scrap metals industry. Someone not only tried to claim that historic site as their own property, but remove the cannon from the site. And it's without the cannon, but the view, the structure, the history is all still there. But what we did was, there is a little section of that waterside where a vehicle pulls in, and it's basically concealed by casuarina trees and overgrown brush on either side. Great spot for handline fishing, and I'm sure that's what the main motive is. The problem is that whoever frequents that place leaves the trash there every single time, and it builds up. And it's just, you know, unbelievable. It's too bad you can't grab somebody by the collar when you see them and tell them about their hip. Other than, if you can't do that, then you have to go through this juggling act of trying to get the police involved. The police come, they don't see nothing. Who's picking up the trash? The MP has to pick up the trash. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it served its purpose for the event, because we want to give of our time freely to our constituency. We removed all the trash from the area. We had about 10 volunteers come out, and then we built a temporary blockade that wouldn't impede the view of the ocean and still allowed pedestrian access, but what should have prevented vehicles from driving in. However, 2 days after we had put up that blockade of heavy rocks and an old tree trunk, they had been all pushed on the side so that the vehicle access could remain. There was a rag already thrown and discarded. But some of the things you find when you're picking up after your own people in their own community, in their own neighborhood, Mr. Deputy Speaker, includes Guinness bottles, Budweiser bottles, cases of beer bottles, where they've obviously gone into the liquor store, filled up an amount, taken in their car, consumed as many as they could, and then discarded them through the window. And you have condoms, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Now, the MP had to pick up condoms on the day, and I did that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, without any problem, because I had just lifted up a moving blanket. You know, those industrial blankets they put over shelving pieces to protect them. I lifted up one of those, and there was all the flesh and carcass of a dog that was rotting, and that just turned my stomach, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I couldn't go back to touch that anymore, but somebody else did. But that allowed me to pick up all of these condoms littered about the area, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's just disgusting. It's disgusting, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what we find in our communities, what we know our people are capable of. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have to work on ourselves as a people. You can't think that because you put litter there, the government is going to pay somebody to come and pick it up. You're not creating a job. You're destroying our culture. A people's culture is not just about shaking and beating, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's not about how you beat the drums. It's not just about how you beat the drums. It's not just about how you shake the bells, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's what you do on Sunday. It's what you do with your future as a young man, as a young woman. Mr. Deputy Speaker, where we go from today into the next 50 years is going to take discipline, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's going to take great leadership, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I'm happy, as I said, to be a part of it. but I'm not going to accept any of what has happened that I'm not pleased with. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Kalani.
Don't start the clock yet. No, you can't start it. Where's Elizabeth before I start? No, I said, where's Elizabeth? Thank you very much. Yeah.
Are you ready, Kalani?
No,
I don't want to steal your time. Just
No.
hold the time.
Yeah. Fix that clock back.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I start, I want to say that there has been constant complaints about the garbage collection within the Kalani constituency. I don't know who's responsible for Kalani, but I would hope that the message get to that individual so they can remove our garbage in a timely manner, because it's causing lots of problem. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the Kalani constituency to offer my contribution to the Nurses and Midwives Bill. I decided as a young man that I would enter the medical field. It was not an easy journey. I was not born to wealth, nor was I born to privilege. I worked my way up over the years, and through the grace of God and hard work, I was fortunate to have a successful career in medicine. As an obstetrician, Mr. Speaker, I was able to help new life come into this world. It's one of my greatest pleasure to see my deliveries as grown men and women making their contribution to our country. And oftentimes, doctors get the most accolades for the good outcomes in healthcare. However, I can say without fear and without contradiction that nurses are the backbone of every healthcare system. And these dedicated professionals render care, organize hospitals and clinics, and save lives every day. Nurses, Mr. Speaker, are the heroes of the healthcare system. We saw this on full display during the pandemic as they cared for the sick and dying. Day after day, year after year, nurses make a difference to those in need. This Nurses and Midwives Bill provides for a comprehensive legal framework to address the evolution of nursing and midwifery in our Bahama land. It expands the practice of nursing and midwifery. It continues the Nursing Council. It provides for the training, regulation, and licensing of registered nurses, midwives, and advanced practice nurses. It provides for the training, regulation, enrollment, and licensing of practice nurses, practical nurses. It provides for the regulation of interns and unlicensed assistive personnel, and it also provides for the registration, regulation, and licensing of nursing agencies. The bill has innovations, such as the introduction of a new category of nurses to be known as the advanced nurse practice, or advanced practice nurse, which includes the midwife, the nurse anesthetist, the clinical nurse specialist,
and the nurse practitioner. Of importance, Mr. Speaker, is the role of the nurse practitioner. The nurse practitioner is trained in the advanced assessment of the physical and psychological health illness status of individuals, families, or groups, and is competent to assess, diagnose, treat, and manage the care of a patient or client within the nurse practitioner's scope of practice and in collaboration and consultation with a medical practitioner. The nurse practitioner, Mr. Speaker, can also write prescriptions guided by the nurse practitioner's drug protocol and the prescriber's formulary for nurse practitioners, and order and interpret screening and diagnostic tests. The changes are in keeping with the innovative expanded roles of nurses. Mr. Deputy, wrong one, move that. Mr. Deputy, I support this bill and the effort to update the legislation governing nurses and midwives. However, Section 68 and 69, Mr. Deputy, I'm sure can be interpreted as rustication, and that was not the intent of this bill, I'm certain. And it would be my recommendation, since 68 and 69 are intertwined, that the bill be put in committee so that that can be corrected and the corrected legislation be brought forward. We must do all we can as legislators to improve the conditions of work for nurses and other medical support personnel. However, there are several competing crises affecting our healthcare system that requires even more than this bill. We have a well-documented shortage of nurses that is part of a wider global problem. According to the International Council of Nurses, due to the aging of the nursing workforce and the effects of the pandemic, up to 13 million nurses will be needed to fill the global nurse shortage gap in the future. There is aggressive international competition for nurses, and Bahamian nurses are especially desired in North America as they are well-trained and English-speaking. The government needs a long-term plan to ensure that we can train, recruit, hire, compensate, and retain sufficient nurses to ensure our healthcare system functions. Mr. Deputy, our country has been in crisis since Hurricane Dorian struck the northern Bahamas in September 2019. One crisis followed another. 6 months later, the pandemic began. The COVID-19 pandemic was an economic, a healthcare, and social crisis. At the worst of it, our tourism economy shut down. Tens of thousands of Bahamians were without work and food. On the healthcare side, wave after wave of the virus took our system to the brink of collapse. The full resources of healthcare system were required to provide for all the people who were sick at the various peaks of waves. As a medical doctor, Mr. Deputy, as a father, a grandfather, and as Prime Minister, my priorities were saving lives, providing food for our people, taking measures to boost our economy, and providing virtual learning for our school children. The masks and vaccines were secured, and other necessary measures saved perhaps thousands of Bahamian lives. Additional stress came to a healthcare system that was already in great need. The last major expansion of the Princess Margaret Hospital was the critical care block, which was launched during a previous FNM administration. And during my administration, we commenced work on upgrading the emergency care facilities at PMH. We also secured funding, Mr. Deputy, for another wing of PMH before we left office. Mr. Deputy, the monies were available for a new 4-story tower that was to be placed east of the critical care block. And, Mr. Deputy, this tower would have contained facilities for maternity, child health, and accident emergency, which were supposed to be placed on the ground floor of this tower. Mr. Deputy, this was a design-build tower, which meant that, and this was being done by the Beck Group, which meant, Mr. Deputy, that the tower would have been in its completion stage within the next 3 or 4 months. The problem at PMH and the Bahamian healthcare system are well known. It is the responsibility of each administration to do its part to improve the system. Sadly, we have a leader who is out of touch, usually out of town, out of his depth, and out of ideas in most areas of public policy.
10 minutes of fire.
We have a leader
10 minutes
who
of fire.
prefers public relations and pandering instead of substance and actions.
Order, members.
Mr. Deputy, the nation was surprised the other day to see the Prime Minister expressing shock and surprise at the conditions at PMH. Our news reported the Prime Minister as saying last week, I quote, "What we see here is not challenges, but truly crisis." And he says he was moved by what he saw. That was last week. But here's what he said in 2021, Mr. Deputy. During a tour at PMH in September 2001, shortly after the PLP came to office, the Prime Minister said, quote, "It is accepted by all that the state of the hospital is dismal." Eyewitness News also reported the following under the headline, quote, "This is not acceptable." Prime Minister Davis tours PMH, says health care as #1 priority for first 100 days, end quote. The report went on to say that the Prime Minister back in 2021 described his observations at the facility as bleak, with the healthcare system teetering over capacity due to being inundated with COVID-19 cases. He also said the healthcare system is a high priority. And the Prime Minister was quoted as saying, quote, "At the moment, the system is such that it has been overwhelmed by the COVID cases, and that has to be addressed first to see exactly what we will do, and it is accepted by all that the state of the hospital is dismal," end quote. Mr. Deputy said in 2021, "We are in a health crisis and, of course, no doubt, an economic crisis." He also said, quote, "If it continues this way, the work would continue well into 2023. And we were saying that's not an acceptable time," end quote. Eyewitness News reported at the time, the Prime Minister added that he will discuss the matter further to see how they can speed up the process. So what did he do from 2021 to last week to improve the hospital and speed up the process, because things were so dismal and bleak? It appears that it was mostly talk and public relations for our globe-trotting leader. If he knew in 2021 that PMH was in such a bad state, how could he last week again appear surprised that the same hospital and healthcare system is in a bad state. According to the Tribune in a story headlined, PM, hospital is in a crisis on January 30th, 2023. The Prime Minister said, quote, "We were hearing about it. We were seeing the news about it, but to come and walk and experience it is truly heart-wrenching. To see what we have today, but we will fix it. We are fixing it." He went on, "Hence, we trust that you will see what we're up against. And as an aside, I said, I see why you brought me, because you'll need money, but we will do what we have to do because I take a very, very serious view," end quote. With his heads in the cloud from constant traveling, the leader seems disconnected from the realities and needs of Bahamian people. It appears, Mr. Deputy, as if our leader is talking like royalty. We are hearing, quote, "We are hearing about it," as royalty speaks. We are seeing the news, language of royalty. And who is the we? The Prime Minister needs to come back to the Bahamian people and explain about this suffering. Prime Minister and his administration did not deliver after his tour when he first came to office. He saw the crisis in the hospital then and did nothing to fix it in his first 100 days. Again, Mr. Deputy, this shows the PLP is good on promising and bad at delivery. At STEMSO conference in Grand Bahama, 2014, Minister for Grand Bahama, now Minister of Health and member for Tall Pines, stated, my quote, "Grand Bahama will have a new hospital by early 2017 with 150 beds," end quote. Words only, Grand Bahama has no such thing. Nearly a year and a half has passed, and the Prime Minister went on to tour the crisis again. Again, he seems surprised and is promising to fix it. I suspect the same thing will happen after this tour, as happened after the first one. That is, Mr. Deputy, nothing, nada, nada. It is that he is out of the country so often. Is it, Mr. Speaker, that he's out of the country so much that he has forgotten the crisis that he left behind and made worse by his inaction and indifference to the daily struggles of Bahamians. He likes to describe the problems, but has few to no solutions. We would not forget that at the beginning of this year, in January, in a speech at Bahamas Business Outlook, the Prime Minister listed his top priorities. He has a chaos in health, but his top priorities, as listed by the Prime Minister, was education, economy, and crime. So where are health and the immigration crisis in his priorities? His priorities are likely to change depending on the crisis of the day and the audience he is pandering to at the moment. In an editorial, Mr. Deputy, the Nassau Guardian described his remarks as, quote, "a speech without a sound strategy." The paper noted, Davis appears to have forgotten that while he is seeking to hear a shared vision of what the next 50 years in the Bahamas looks like, his administration has presented no such vision. Davis presented no vision for what the Bahamas may look like in 50 years as birth rates fall, crime rates climb, and communities in our family islands are increasingly abandoned. But he charged others with formulating one: wishful thinking and good intentions are no substitute for a sound strategy, end quote. Mr. Deputy, the Nassau Guardian, January 29th editorial was titled, "PM Outlandish Claim on Economy." It noted, It remains incredulous that Prime Minister Davis continues to maintain that he met the economy, Bahamian economy, in severe recession when he came to office in September 2021. Davis made the claim in his national address last October and repeatedly in the House of Assembly since his election. He most recently repeated it at the Bahamas Business Outlook last week. This claim is outlandish, it is false. No amount of repeating it will make it a fact. It went on to say, in fact, the economy grew by 14% in 2021, during which his administration was in office for only the last 3 months of the year. Following the worst period of the pandemic, the Bahamas, like all other tourism destinations, is benefiting from inflows of visitors, reflecting 2 years of pent-up demand when travel was severely restricted. Rather than serving as a catalyst to post-pandemic resurging economy, the Davis administration is benefiting handsomely from a number of projects left underway by the former administration. The editorial listed a number of projects launched by the FNM and my administration. Mr. Deputy, because of his indifference and the inaction, this New Day Gone Again PLP leader has made things worse since coming to office. Crime is worse because of inaction. The immigration crisis is worse. Real property tax has tripled. Inner city tax-free zone, government trying to usurp the law and tax the individuals within the inner city. Government proposing to take rent from tenants to meet demands of landowners' real property tax. Mortgages has gone up because of additional real property tax, thus delaying mortgages. The cost of living crisis is worse, with much higher BPL bills and VAT on breadbasket items and medicine. The brave Davis inflation on top of the world inflation has made Bahamians very, very stressful. PMH and our healthcare system is in worse shape because of the PLP. The roads are worse. The roads are worse. In a matter of months, Mr. Deputy, I want you to listen. In a matter of months, we will have the Carifta Games in April and the Bahama Games in July. Yet, the stadium has been declared as unsafe. And an assessment done in April of 2021 suggested that the stadium, to be made safe, needed anywhere from $25 to $32 million expenditure. But yet, individuals will be placed in such a facility in April and June. Should a disaster occur, Mr. Deputy, can we deal with it? But we had plans to repair before moving forward.
Too much airtime. Too much airtime.
The Prime Minister is good at only one thing, and that is travel and taxation. Taxation. Instead of addressing the many crises at home, he likes to pretend as a big man on the world stage. I saw he is just back from good trip in Argentina, and we knew there are plenty, as we know, Mrs. Deputy, that travel for 2023 is just getting started. There are plenty more frequent flyer miles the Prime Minister will rack up as murder count increases, the PMH remains in a dire state, and more migrants rush to our shores. He will not seriously address the crisis at PMH. Prime Minister will not come up with a policy to fix our chronic nursing shortages. He does not spend enough time at his desk working to solve the problems facing our nation. That's why he keeps touring same places with the same problems, saying the same things, and not delivering any results. Mrs. Deputy, the crime crisis in New Providence is a significant contributor to the healthcare problems we face. The shootings, stabbings, and other assaults have to be dealt with at the hospital. These violent incidents stress the emergency rooms and wards. In discussing last year's crime statistics with the media last week, the police commissioner revealed disturbing data. There were 128 murders, which is one of the highest such totals in our history. Armed robberies were up 34% last year. Robberies and shop breakings were up also. The opposition has asked over and over, what is the Prime Minister's plan to deal with crime? All we ever hear from the Prime Minister are slick words and empty pledges. And all that happens on the streets of New Providence is more violence, more crime, and more chaos. When the hospital is filled with victims of violence, that makes it difficult for doctors and nurses to get to other patients with emergencies. The Bahamas needs better leadership than it is getting from our leader today. Mr. Deputy, just as the crime crisis contributes to the healthcare crisis, similarly, the immigration crisis affects our healthcare system. Sadly, Haiti is in a state of collapse. The assassination of their president made a bad situation worse. Haitians are fleeing their homeland in tens of thousands. Migrants are getting on crammed boats and that are unseaworthy, risking their lives. They prefer to take the risk rather than living in the state of anarchy in Haiti. We already have a serious problem with undocumented Haitians in the Bahamas. They are significant users of our limited public health care resources. I fear a massive influx of Haitians due to Haiti collapse could make our existing healthcare problems much, much worse, and in fact, collapse. We need the Prime Minister to do all he can to ensure Defense Force and Department of Immigration have the resources they need to find and return to their homelands all who reside illegally in the Bahamas. And if Bahamians want to reserve their homeland, they must abide by the law and stop hiring individuals. The visa problem from Haiti must be investigated, as we had previously stopped issuing visa because of corruption and mishandling. The shanty towns must be stopped, as these pose great threats to our water table and our healthcare system, with the possibility of introducing cholera, which would be devastating, not only to our healthcare system, but to our tourism product. I applaud the Prime Minister for saying he will ask the Attorney General to pursue a strategy to alter or vary the court injunction imposed on the shantytown removal policy initiated by my administration. The Prime Minister should follow through on the policy we pursued to clear and remove illegal shantytown in our country. The Bahamian people elected us to protect and preserve the Bahamas for Bahamians. We cannot allow the Bahamas to be overrun by outsiders. We cannot get to a place, for example, where our hospitals and clinics are filled even more with undocumented migrants, and Bahamians have to wait on lines outside to access the resources of their own state. Mr. Deputy, there's much work for this Prime Minister to do to address the serious problems facing our country. Thus far, he's failing, and failing miserably. The only thing this Prime Minister excels at is traveling. He's wasting taxpayers' money and time on many of these conferences. He needs to settle down, Mr. Deputy, get serious, and get to work doing the job Bahamians elected him to do. Mr. Deputy, in supporting this legislation, I urge the Prime Minister, for the sake of Bahamian people, to get serious about addressing our many national crises. The country needs substance and action, and not just public relations and pandering from our frequent flyer. Mr. Deputy, Such a problem would not have existed if they had followed the plans that were left in place. The tower that was being designed, built, that was supposed to be east of the existing critical care block would have resolved our problem in that we would have had a new emergency room on the ground floor and maternal and child health care centers for our babies and our mothers on the upper third and fourth floor. And the monies were available and it was a design build, would have been completed within the next 2 to 3 weeks. The problems today would not have existed. Mr. Deputy, I support this legislation.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? Oh, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
I sat here.
Listen to him spew venom.
I recall that last Sunday, we celebrated the feast of the conversion of Paul.
The Feast of the Conversion of Paul. The Damascus
moment. And I could only say the member for Kalani is having a Damascus moment.
He fell from his ass.
And, you know,
Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Oh.
You know, you had 4 years. If those who were there when I visited
I've
the
got to
hospital
send you this thing.
and spoke about the
The
crisis,
word ass in English.
and if they had witnessed what I witnessed, as many of the reporters here witnessed, when we saw gurneys with elderly persons in the corridors and repairs at every little inch of the hospital because of the neglect of the infrastructure of the hospital for the 4 years, deterioration, and 4.5 years, right? And because of that neglect, yes, I did say I can fix it, and we are fixing it. That's what I said. And my visit to the hospital was to see the progress of that effort to fix it. And I was pleased by that effort because a number of the wards that had been in disuse for years under your watch, to your whole term, just lay bare, right, depriving the citizens of the beds that were there, right? You blew it, brother. So I went to see that, and seeing that, we had to see how those works were being executed during and at a time when the hospital was continuing to operate. So if anyone listened to what I was saying as well, I was congratulating and expressing my appreciation to the hospital administrators and the hospital staff for being innovative and proactive to ensure that despite the circumstances under which they had to deliver service, it was being done. The corridors were to see the space in which the nurses and doctors had to be operating. And, you know, it would have been okay if I was saying, you know, I mean, it appears to be hundreds of persons that was seeking attention, seeing rooms where people, makeshift rooms, where persons who are on gurney are waiting to be admitted to the hospital because there are no rooms in the hospital. and what we were doing, right? We did make an arrangement to go to Doctors West to have beds, to make space, to have space, to put patients, our Bahamian patients. That's what we did. It's costing us a lot too. So we have to as well understand the urgency of the works having to be completed at the hospital that we're doing. We're doing the women's, the
Female medical.
female medical one.
Male medical two.
Male medical two.
Second
restoration.
restoration.
They were all, the accident, they were all left in shambles.
Left them in shambles.
And they didn't just, what we met in 2020, they just was in that state in 2021. Yeah. Now, they had been there. In fact, some of these wards were closed for years.
Absolutely, pretty much in its
So what were they doing? He says he created a tower, a plan with a tower. That's the Tower of Babel.
He didn't have no plan.
That's the Tower of Babel.
He had a dream.
Right? But what did you do, man?
It was a dream.
You had
nothing to work
I recall.
With. It was a dream.
I recall.
We could build one for you.
I recall that I was continually reminded. I'm a doctor. But as a doctor, holding the post of Prime Minister, right, and knowing the state of that hospital, and to do nothing. Nothing was done.
Got a lot to
now,
say now.
I can talk about the Family Islands and all the clinics, right, that they just abandoned and did nothing to.
Absolutely.
And he has,
we renovate them all that you left behind.
And they have,
in disrepair.
And he has the temerity to come and say what we must do and what we must not do.
Wow. Yeah.
Damascus, you don't have the moral.
Absolutely.
Standing to speak to these matters. You don't have it.
Pintard should say.
And you could hang on what is written in the Guardian about me as much as you wish. I am not intending to follow what it says. I have my job to do, and I'm going to do it. And we are doing it.
That's right.
I know you wish, I know it eats you. That you are unable to capture the attention of the world as we now do. This country is facing this country is facing, right, possible extinction. Right, that's the reality. This country is facing possible extinction. The consequence of climate change is real, and what we will be at the end of the day will either be climate refugees or be doomed to a watery grave. And you have to understand that. And you're not going to be able to address that by sitting home. And you know what's so amazing? They used to say I can't travel. And now that I'm traveling, it's a problem. And it's troubling, right? Yeah. But I don't make a trip that's not necessary. The trips I take are necessary. You know something? You talk about me being in Argentina. I spent, 1 day or 2 days. I had the meeting. But that trip in Argentina, right, I was able to speak to the Prime Minister pro tem of Haiti. He was there. I was able to speak to the President of the Dominican Republic. He was there. You know what was the result of that interaction? Getting to know, well, I knew the Prime Minister of Haiti for quite a while now. But you know what that was able to do? The moment I was able to say to him, look, man, we have 400 plus persons coming in. We need them out. And so he was able to, the Minister of Foreign Affairs was able to speak to this minister and get them out right away. Right? Our diplomatic personnel in Haiti felt threatened by the escalation of the challenges that was going on. You know how we got them out? You know how we got them out? Right? Because we were able to speak by relationship, having spoken to the president of the foreign affairs of the Dominican Republic. Right? They jumped to the rescue right away. That's brave call. Better let's deal with that. You know what they did? They flew their helicopter into Patienville, El Rancho, and took our diplomatic personnel out of any danger and to safety in Dominican Republic. See, that's what happens when you develop relationships. Right? Leadership. And I say, thank God as an Argentinian to be able to make those connections. Right place, right? So, but when we think about when I walked through that hospital, and when I saw, and most of those people, they were the least amongst us, man. And you could look at them and see they could hardly afford even, to be there. That's what we have. They were the least amongst us. And we are told, and I'm reminded, that what you do for the least, your brother, that you do unto me. And so however they spin what I had to say about crisis, whatever you say about me seemingly surprised, whatever you say, what I know is how moved I was when I saw hundreds of Bahamians, indigenous Bahamians, right, just lying in gurneys, wanting help, and the manner in which service was being delivered to them. That moved me. That I did not expect to see in the magnitude that I saw. And everyone, what I saw was in there all the time. Right? Because I could tell you. Right? It wasn't there all the time. No, you speak to the personnel. Right? You see, so I say, the neglect of our health system in recent years was indefensible. And what we were there doing, we were inspecting our efforts to fix it. That's what we were doing. And it is being fixed. Being fixed. It is being fixed. Right? And within the next 6 or 8 weeks, those wards will be up and running, and we will no longer need the Doctors Hospital West. Right, we're also creating the module hospital that's being built. Right, yeah. With additional 26 beds. And we are well on the way, having completed the feasibility study, and everything has already been done for the hospital to be built here in New Providence, and it's now gone to the financiers for their look at, and we're hoping to get a response in very shortly. The hospital in Grand Bahama, all the way, the funds have already been secured. It's in central banking. The money is here. Right, and I'm just saying, and that hospital, we are back is doing that, and we should see that up right very soon, right? And so I'm happy to report that we are taking a bold approach to improving healthcare in the Bahamas. We are. I know doctor, but I know when I see people hurting, and I know, and I may not be able to, I know, when they're hurting, and I know what has to happen to relieve their hurt. I can see that. And so we are committed to investing in the latest medical technology. We're committed to building new facilities and recruiting the best and brightest medical professionals. Because we understand, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that access to quality health care is a basic human right. It didn't appear to be so. And so we will continue to do everything in our power to ensure that all of our citizens have access to the care they need.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
I had sat silent. I'm trying to figure out whether the Prime Minister was rebutting what I said, or whether he's wrapping up and speaking, because I noticed the clock has not moved. Because I would like to rebut many of what he said, and for clarification. So I need a distinction as to whether he's closing or whether he's rebutting what I said, because many of what he said I would like to respond to.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador.
Yes, no right to
in
rebut.
that case, I rise on a point of clarification.
No. You
cannot.
There's a point of clarification.
My understanding was the minister was closing. I understood, was rebutting what I said. In that case, I rise on a point of clarification.
Okay. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani. Honorable members.
I rise on a point of clarification. The Prime Minister cannot give wrong information here, and I sit back and just say nothing. I rise on a point of clarification.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Deputy, the Prime Minister spoke about climate change being real. It is. Climate change is real. And the problems that we face, are very real. Immigration crisis, health crisis, crime. No. Mr. Deputy, no. Mr. Deputy, Prime Minister, there is.
Honorable members.
There is a clarification.
Order. He's gonna get to the point.
No.
The chair.
No.
Okay, Kalani has the floor.
The Prime Minister cannot come here and believe that he can base this side without clarification. This is not his house. This is the people's house. And he has in this house, every man is equal.
Thank you, honorable member.
In this house, every man is equal.
Yeah. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador.
Mr. Deputy Speaker. There's a point of the Speaker. First of all,
are you finished?
It's not hold. Mr. Speaker, you have this member sit down. Will you sit down?
Of your actions. It's a result of your administration and your failures. The
problems that we face today would not exist. So these problems you have created.
Thank you, honorable member.
Inefficiencies.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Kalani should not be on his feet. The member of Kalani does not have anything for clarification or point of order. He should not be on his feet. He spoke. You asked the question. You said as many. As many recognize the next speaker, who is now the member for Cat Island. And because he is now speaking, he is concluding our debate.
That's it.
The member has spoken. The member simply wishes to stand and demonstrate that he's more of the leader than the member for Marco. That's what he's seeking to do.
Members, order, members. Members, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani. Honorable members, order. Order, honorable members.
Mr. Deputy,
The chair recognizes Kalani.
in this house, in this house, in this house, everybody is equal. In this house, everybody's equal. The problems that we face today, the problems that we face today in the healthcare system is because of their inadequacies. In addition to that, the Prime Minister should not worry about what happened on the opposition side. He needs to worry about that crew in the front bench.
Thank you, honorable members. Before we go on, the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador is wrapping up.
Yeah, yes, okay. Now,
The chair recognizes honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Parliament ought not to be used to settle internal scores and ought to promote one's own ambition to become, to challenge leadership. I sat.
I'll bet you do.
Well, I was talking about you.
I bet you.
Oh, it's you. It's you I talking about? It's you. I call your name.
Honorable members.
Oh, it's you. It's you. It's you. I call no name. But my grandfather said, when you throw a rock in a pack, the one who squeals is the one who gets it. So I now realize, boy, Marco City, it is true. I was just talking, I was talking. Now you see, he is, he's going to use this. See, stand up there. He stand up and spent half hour castigating me.
You personally.
I personally, and was very personally insulting to me.
Yeah.
But I take it because I no longer, I no longer have much regard for what he says anymore. Right? And you are the leader, so and I see now why you are not comfortable being around when he's speaking, because he is embarrassing your party. So be careful, like I said. So, Speaker,
It reaches the sky.
like I say, our healthcare system, is only as strong as the people who work within it. That is why we view addressing the needs of our nurses and other medical professions as a priority. We have signed union agreements that gave nurses increased salaries and benefits. And we are working so that all medical professionals can have the resources and support they need to do their jobs professionally and with compassion. However, it's important to understand the headwinds we are facing. Our efforts to recruit are competing with a very significant increase in the recruitment of these professionals by the United States and Canada. This has led to a shortage in our own healthcare system. Deputy Speaker, this loss of skilled professionals not only affects the delivery of healthcare, but also has a far-reaching economic implications for our country. We lose the talent and contribution of those in whom we would have invested substantially. The loss of these professionals has an impact on the quality of care that we're able to provide. The very high demand for skilled healthcare professionals in the United States has resulted in a very attractive salary and benefits offers from American employers. We must similarly invest in our own healthcare system provide better salaries and benefits to our nurses, as well as improve working conditions and opportunities for career advancement. I must say here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you would have heard the nurses praise the government for what we would have done for them in the contract that we signed. The largest increases they've ever had was done in this new agreement. And recognizing the fact that our nurses are being recruited to the United States and Canada, we even included in the contract a retention bonus so that nurses, if they stay, they look for something at the end of a certain period, 3, 4, 5 years, to get an additional sum just as a bonus for having remained in the Bahamas, because, as has been pointed out earlier, we cannot compete with the attractive salaries that Canada or the United States could pay. In fact, even before the salaries are paid, many nurses are paid a hefty sum as a signing bonus, anywhere sometimes from $60,000 up to $80,000, $90,000 as signing bonus to attract them to go. And so, to counteract that, we are investing in our system to ensure that the physical environments are appropriate for their work, that we increased their salaries, and we also added in their contract a retention bonus so that in the event if they resist the temptation to leave after a certain number of years, they can expect a lump sum payment for having stayed for that period. Of course, we also must invest in training and development programs and provide access to latest technology and equipment. As I said, those things will help us to retain our current nurses, but I think it will also serve to attract new ones to the profession. This is important and this is urgent. Our nurses are a valuable asset to our country, and we must do everything in our power to retain them. I am pleased to support the Minister of Health and Wellness in moving this Nurses and Midwives Bill. It has been carefully crafted to ensure the growth and development of the nursing and midwifery professions in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. This bill will expand and improve the practice of nursing and midwifery, continue the Nursing Council of the Bahamas, and provide for training, regulation, registration, and licensing of registered nurses, midwives, and advanced practice nurses. It also provides for the regulation, enrollment, and licensing of practical nurses, as well as the regulation of nurse interns and unlicensed assistive personnel. Furthermore, it provides for the regulation, registration, and licensing of nursing agencies. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the regulation of nursing agencies will assure the public that these agencies are operating in an ethical and professional manner and that they provide safe and quality care for patients. The training, regulation, and licensing of nurses and nurse interns will ensure that they are well prepared and competent to enter the workforce, and the regulation of unlicensed assistive personnel will ensure that they are properly trained and qualified to assist nurses and midwives in their practices. I am proud of the agreement which this administration signed with the Nurses Union, which, as I said, will result in increased salaries and benefits for our hardworking nurses. It will improve, the agreement provide for improved working conditions, better pay and benefits, and opportunities for professional growth and development. Again, this will help attract and retain the best and brightest talent in the nursing profession and ensure that our citizens receive the highest quality of care. This agreement, I believe, serves as a model for other professions in the healthcare sector and send a clear message that the government values and appreciates the contributions of this sector. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the nursing union for their cooperation and collaboration in reaching this agreement. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to all the nurses in the Bahamas for their dedication and hard work. Their commitment to the health and well-being of our citizens is truly inspiring. You know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, during the COVID-19 pandemic, our healthcare workers showed remarkable courage and dedication. We will never forget how they put their lives on the line to care for the sick and protect our communities. And we remain full of gratitude for their sacrifice. It is therefore incumbent upon us to support them and to ensure that they have the resources, equipment, and support they need to continue their vital work. We are making significant investments in the infrastructure of our hospitals and clinics. We are increasing the number of beds and purchasing the latest medical equipment. We are also investing in the education and training of our healthcare workers to ensure they have the skills and knowledge to provide the best care possible. We are implementing telemedicine services to make it easier for patients to access medical advice and treatment. And we are investing in the development of primary care services to provide essential care closer to home. Finally, we are working to ensure that our healthcare system is more accountable and responsive to the needs of our citizens. We are establishing a national healthcare regulatory authority to ensure that standards of care are maintained. And we are also increasing public engagement and transparency to ensure that our citizens have a voice in the decisions that affect their health and well-being. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Nurses and Midwives Bill is a critical step in the development of the nursing and midwifery profession in the Bahamas. And I urge the members of this House to support it, and I'm pleased to hear no voices of dissent or discontent in respect to this bill.
One was a little
Quite.
crappy, but you know.
No, yeah, well, they can't do any
You
better.
got him to sit down.
Yeah, they can't do any better. You know, it is their job to throw their darts at me. I accept it. But how that saying go? What your mother will tell me? No weapons formed against me. That's what your mother will tell me. And she said, right. And so I tell you all to stay out of my business. Stay out our business. Right? See, I don't get your business, you know. It's only when your business spill over into business. It's only when your business interferes with the work of government that I will respond.
Are you keeping the member for Kalani?
So, Deputy Speaker.
Are you keeping the member for Kalani?
No,
we're talking about Kalani right now. We're talking about Kalani's future.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I now so move that we support the bill.
I think she is too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. Nurses and Midwives Bill 2022, a bill for an act to expand the practice of nursing and midwifery to continue the Nursing Council of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas to provide for the training, regulation, registration, and licensing of registered nurses, midwives, and advanced practice nurse, to provide for the training, regulation, enrollment, and licensing of licensed practical nurses, to provide for the regulation of nurse interns, to provide for the regulations of unlicensed, assentive personnel, to provide for the regulation, registration, and licensing of nursing agencies, to repeal the Nurses and Midwives Act 1971, and for connected purposes. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to expand the practice of nursing and midwifery, to continue the Nursing Council of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, to provide for the training, regulation, registration, and licensing of registered nurses, midwives, and advanced practice nurses, to provide for the training, regulation, enrollment, and licensing of licensed practical nurses, to provide for the regulation of nurse intern, to provide for the regulation of unlicensed assistive personnel, to provide for the regulation, registration, and licensing of nursing agencies, to repeal the Nurses and Midwives Act 1971, and for connected purposes.
For the second reading of bills,
No further second readings, Mr. Deputy.
For the second reading?
No further second readings, Mr.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Mhm. Hmm? Yeah. Okay. Committee of the Whole House?
No, Madam Speaker.
Third reading and passing a bill?
No third readings, Madam.
Consideration of Senate's amendments? Resolutions? Member statements? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to take this opportunity to do a couple of things at this point. First is, this is the 1st of February, and this is traditionally the day that the nominations open for national honors. The National Honor System under the Act of 2016 allows for people at large in the country to make nominations for those persons who they wish to get awards. And the awards are Order of National Hero, Order of Nation, Order of the Bahamas, Order of Excellence, Order of Distinction, Order of Merit, Order of Lignum Vitae, which is for those under the age of 25. There is also, in addition, the Distinguished Service Medals for citizens of the Bahamas in recognition of exceptional service in the public service or civil society. There are badges of honor for persons in civil society who perform exceptional service for the Bahamas, and there are medals of bravery. So we try from the 1st of February until the 31st of March to accept nominations from the public. The forms are available on the Bahamas government's website, and you can send them on to the Cabinet Office either electronically or in hard copy. So that's from the 1st of February to the 31st of March. Nominations for those persons who you'd like to get national honors. Secondly, in relation to my own constituency, I wish to extend a very happy birthday to the Right Honorable, belatedly so, to the Right Honorable Reverend Dr. Philip Ramming, who turned 90 years of age on Saturday past, and who is the author of the pledge. So I congratulate him on accomplishing that milestone. And thirdly, I want to thank, on behalf of the L.W. Young Junior High School, the chair of the Bahamas Agricultural Industrial Corporation and its minister for extending support to the entrepreneurial program at the L.W. Young. They sent just me this afternoon and both video and stills of the children engaged in making soup, yes, handicrafts out of coconut. And The teacher was just saying this was extraordinary to see how interested they are in actually doing this, people who are not normally interested in school. So I thought I should take the opportunity to thank you for that. I think they'll be asking whether the program can be extended for another 2 weeks because the children are so interested in the program. So I want to commend you for that. Thank you. So those are the three things I wanted to raise and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Further member statements? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, like again, it's a recurrent problem in my constituency. Again, the wedges between Old Fort Bay and Lightfoot Key is continuously debris, Kentucky boxes, etc. They're not maintained, and every week we have to find individuals to clear it. I ask that Ministry of Environment or some other government ministry take a handle of that for us. I beg again and plead to the construction companies to kindly monitor their staff from throwing all of these excess debris on our bridges. And then I also have a complaint, Madam Speaker, with the airport road. I understand, and it's still there. The invasive trees on the lakeside of the airport road was removed, and we appreciate that. We understood what they're trying to do. However, all the trees, the debris was left. They're now dried, and they are a fire disaster hazard. So I would ask that those who was responsible or who had the contract for clearing the bridges on the entire airport road, the lakeside, to move these trees which have now dried out. And Madam Speaker, those are my concerns.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Further member statements? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Granville.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Very quickly, Madam Speaker, I wish to offer condolences to two of my two families in my constituency. The family of Linda Ballou, whose funeral we attended on Saturday. Both her sisters, Miss Alice McGregor and Kathy Munnings, are great friends and supporters of all on this side, and all on this side were able to attend the funeral of Miss Ballou. And so she was one of the things that was said about her at the funeral, which was consistent, was regardless of her physical challenges, because she was limited to a wheelchair, was that she was always smiling, and that she always had a bubbly, pleasant personality. And so her family will be missed. Her daughter, Tanya, also worked in my constituency office as well, so we want to offer our condolences. And also to a very well-known community leader, Miss April Crowther-Gow, who passed away and whose funeral was on Saturday. She was a very, very well-known community leader, community activist, someone who was a great party supporter, party officer, and someone who made a significant contribution to the island of Grand Bahama, made a significant contribution to the Bahamas. She was very involved with local government. I believe she rose to being the Deputy Chief Counselor in Grand Bahama, and was recognized internationally as well. So we want to offer our condolences. One point also, Madam Speaker, which I was supposed to raise during my contribution in Proceedings Key. If I can get the attention of the Minister for Health, the clinic in Proceedings Key. I got a text while I was making my contribution that they wanted me to just keep in the forefront of the Ministry of Health's mind that they still require the full-time nurse to be placed on Proceedings Key. You and I have, Minister, we have spoken about this. We know what the challenge is, and obviously we would not want her to be put at any risk. So we understand those challenges, but the people of Swedenski just want to make sure that they are not forgotten, and that we continue to push to make sure that that full-time nurse happens for them. They are pleased that the nurse visits, but they are used to having a full-time nurse there, so if something happens on the off days, that full-time nurse would be able to take care of them, as well as the nurse in High Rock. What we are advised of is that the nurse lives in Freeport, but works in High Rock and leaves at 5 o'clock. We need one for whatever we call the district. But they have facilities in High Rock. They have apartments in High Rock, and it's just a question of the nurse being given the necessary approval to be put in one of the apartments. The existing nurse that's there, she's willing to do it, and the community needs her to be there. We had a very scary situation at a church service. The leader was there as well, and the member for Central, where the preacher, in the middle of giving a sermon, almost passed out, and we had to call the ambulance for him. But it takes, on a regular day, it takes an hour and a half to get from Freeport to High Rock. But if we had a nurse that was scheduled there, that nurse would have been able to immediately be deployed there. So those are the two concerns that we have, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Further member statements? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Anne's.
Madam Speaker, members of my constituency are wondering why we didn't pass that nurses and midwives bill today.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Yes. Madam Speaker, wanted to just inform residents of Marco City I'll be holding office hours tomorrow evening, as is customary, at 6 p.m. Tomorrow. I also wanted to raise a concern mentioned by, we have, I think, possibly the largest police population in Grand Bahama. It resides in Marco City at Tudor Gardens, which is one of the facilities. There have been some concerns expressed about the vehicles. Member for Cat Island, Rumpkins, and Salvador, that you took possession of. Two things. One is how many of the vehicles would be made available to both Abaco and the Grand Bahama. Though I know the government reserves the right to alter what is the intended nature of a donation, wanted to get a sense of how many vehicles are going to go into Abaco and how many going into Grand Bahama, which is the areas identified as a part of the original intent of the donation, Dorian hit areas. And then secondly, I know that the Minister of National Security has been ramping up the recruitment of young cadets, particularly for the police force. And again, my understanding is that you've redeployed the bulk of those persons who were in Grand Bahama at the Academy into New Providence. I think you're bringing on another 100 or so. 25 just arrived recently. To what extent are we going to retain persons in Grand Bahama as well as be deployed in Abaco?
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, the deployment of vehicles and manpower is operational is for the Commissioner of Police. I know that we have 105 recruits in training in New Providence and 20 in Grand Bahama. Recruitment, I'm assured by the member for Cat Island, Ramkeyans, and Salvador, will continue to meet the deficit. As to vehicles, that is a matter with the officer in charge of the Force Garage and the Commissioner. I can say that we are repairing vehicles that we've met out of service, and the Ministry of Finance has agreed for the purchase of 100 new patrol vehicles, which are light trucks. And it's expected that some of those will be deployed to the Family Islands.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for West Grand Bahama.
Madam Speaker, I wish to also make a member statement very brief, but to answer the member for St. Anne's, who asked about why the bill was not passed today, because we've agreed to allow it to remain in committee until next week to correct the matters raised by Central and also by Kalani. And the member for Tall Pines recognizes that there need to be one or two changes, and that'll take place, and we will pass next week, Wednesday. Madam Speaker, I just wish to, in my member statement, to recognize someone who has contributed to this country in such a way where I categorize him as one of the true giants of our country, although he is a young man, relatively speaking. He is from the island of Bimini, and he's called Brave. His name is Leonard Brave Stewart, an incredible contributor to national development, to the development of young people, to our tourism industry, and of course to the island of Bimini. There are very few who can walk in his shoes. It is so fitting when you think of the Ramin Brothers song, "Who Will Fill Those Shoes?" He's one of those individuals, Madam Speaker, who gave all that he could up to his very last breath to the island of Bimini, to the people he loves so dearly. He will be laid to rest this weekend, and I'm sure that the leaders of our party and many of the country will be there because of his outstanding contribution. He's one of a kind, Madam Speaker, and he defines servitude, service to man. He gives service to man any way he possibly can, Madam Speaker, and he made his contribution. He's a true giant, one of the great men of our nation, and we bade him farewell. But his legacy will live on because there'll be many who will try to fill his shoes, which gives you something to strive for. The work, the great work of Leonard Brave Stewart. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Further member statements? No further statements. Appointment of select committees. Instructions to select committees. Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings.
Yeah.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Yes. Madam Speaker, I'd like to give notice that the opposition will be calling for the establishment of a select committee on matters related to the collapse of FTX in this jurisdiction, to investigate and consider all matters relating to the collapse of FTX, with leave to send for persons and papers, with leave to sit from place to place, and with leave to sit during any recess.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Yes, after I've signed this, there's one more, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the opposition would like to call for the establishment.
Yeah, once he's finished that one. Take the first one. Order the notice be brought up.
Thank you.
Order the notice to lie on the table. Further notices.
Madam Speaker, the opposition wishes to call for the establishment of a select committee on matters relating to the immigration crisis in the Bahamas, to investigate and consider all matters relating to immigration crisis in the Bahamas, with leave to send for persons and papers, with leave to sit from place to place, and with leave to sit during any recess.
Order that the notice be brought up.
Thank you.
Order the notice to lie on the table. Further notices? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rum Keynes, and Salvador.
Madam Speaker, I give notice that at the next sitting of Parliament, wish to discuss the following resolution. Resolve this House adopt the 2022 fiscal strategy report and the medium-term management strategy 2023-2024 to 2025-2026.
Order that the notice be brought up. Order that notice to land the table. Further notices?
All notices in the name of the government.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Madam Speaker, renew all notices in the name of the officers.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Adjournment?
Madam Speaker, I now move for the House adjourns to Monday, February 6th, 2023 at 10 a.m. Monday, February 26th. Monday, February 6th, 2023 at 10 a.m.
Is there a seconder?
Second, please.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the House do now adjourn
Monday.
to Monday. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is agreed. The final adjournment?
Madam Speaker, I now move that the House stands adjourned to Monday, February 6th at 10 a.m. Monday, February 6th, 2023 at 10 a.m.
The House now stands adjourned to Monday, February 6th at 2023 at 10 a.m.
All rise!